Chat, for weeks you have been asking me to make a tier list, okay? All the time I've been saying I'm not gonna make a tier list, and you've been asking me to make a tier list. I said for 75 subs I would do a tier list, and we hit that goal a couple of weeks ago. So it's time for the tier list, but there's a problem with that tier list logic, okay? Problem is I'm not a great gamer. You know this, I know this, you've seen me play the game, okay? You don't want my opinion. I'm a statistician, I'm an analyst, I'm a caster, so I'm gonna do you one better. I am here to present to you not a tier list of my own opinion or of my own building. I am here to present you the mathematically correct Rainbow Six tier list. I'm here to give you the tier list to define all of your ranked and competitive games in one fell swoop. I'm going to be looking at statistics. As a statistician, I'm going to be looking at the numbers, and I could use the ranked numbers, okay? Those numbers are somewhat given out, not directly, not in full, but we get these graphs every couple of months from Ubisoft. But the problem is that you also suck at Siege. So we're not going to be touching any of the rank stats, okay? I don't really get who's doing well in ranked and who's not. We're listening to the pros, okay? I have gone through and gotten all the data that I can possibly get from the Blast regional leagues, and we're going to be pulling from that instead. Specifically, I'm looking at the data from the Blast Rainbow Six Stage 2 leagues. That's all of the group stages, all of the playoffs, all of the LCQ, and I will be pulling data from all 9 regions to maximize our sample size for this tier list. All regions will be counted, and all of them will be counted equally for this tier list, all right? Now, this is going to be a pretty short video or short live stream if you're watching this live on Twitch, okay? Because in Rainbow Six Siege, winning is good, and we want to win as many rounds as possible. Thus, we want to be playing operators who win as many rounds as possible. And I can divide. So we will be calculating the operator win percentages, and that will tell us immediately, in just a simple calculation, who the best operators are. So, without further ado, the greatest operators in Rainbow Six Siege are Kali and Cav. Kali at 53% and Caviera at 68%. Okay, this is going to be a longer stream than I thought. Of course, the problem with these raw win rates is the classic problem of sample size. And I'm pretty sure absolutely nobody plays Cav or Kali. In fact, I know they don't. Out of 5,924 rounds, Cav was picked just 25 times, winning 17 and losing 8. And that does indeed equal a 68% win rate, okay? But as we say, as the sample size shrinks, we're expecting outliers on our data. And I don't think we can trust this to immediately say that Cav is the best operator in the game. Now, Kali is a little bit better. Kali is picked 4 times as much, almost 5 times as often as Cav, with a sample size of 116 rounds. But 2/3 of all of Kali's play came on just 5 bomb sites. On the vast majority of sites, she was essentially not used even a little bit. I think we'd agree that the operators that deserve to be at the top of our tier list need to be universal. They need to be good in many situations, not just a few pocket strats where they dominate, like Kali sometimes does, but they need to be able to influence almost every single round. And that's why I'm inventing a brand new statistics for this tier list called viability. We're going to create this stat, and we're going to say that an operator is viable on a bomb site if that operator was played in at least half the average number of rounds that all operators are playing. Take Office Exhibition as an example, okay? Office Exhibition was played 208 times in competitive Tier 1 Siege in Stage 2. There are 37 operators on each side, and we're going to divide by 2 to cut that number in half. So that gives us a total of 14, meaning that any operator that was played 15 or more times, we're going to be calling viable on Office Exhibition. Basically, if every single operator was played the exact same number of times, they would be played about 28 times each. So if you're not even hitting half of that average, we're considering you non-viable. This is a pretty broad definition. This is a pretty generous definition of viability, but I think it's going to fit, and I think it's going to be universally applicable. Specifically for Office Exhibition, this means Ace, Ashe, Blitz, Butt, Capitao, Deimos, Dokkaebi, Flores, Grim, IQ, Lion, Maverick, Monty, Nomad, Striker, Thatcher, Thermite, Twitch, Ying, and Zofia are going to be considered viable attackers for this specific bomb site. And then Aruni, Azami, Bandit, Castle Clash, Fenrir, Frost, Goyo, Kaid, Legion, Malusi, Mira, Mute, Smoke, Tubrow, Valkyrie, Vigil, Wamai, and Warden will be considered viable for the defense on this bomb site. Now, we are kind of forgetting one thing, right? Because sometimes an operator will be not played on a site, not because they're not good enough, but because they're too good. In Rainbow Six Siege, we have bans. And if an operator gets banned all the time on a map, they might not hit a threshold, not because they're not good enough on that bomb site, but because they're way too good and they're getting banned too often. So instead, we're also going to be considering an operator viable on a site if they're getting banned more than the average number of rounds. So if every operator was banned at the exact same rate, we can calculate that ban rate, and if an operator is being banned more than that ban rate, I'm going to consider them viable even if they don't hit the play rate threshold. So a similar formula to what we're using for operator picks. However, we aren't having it this time because the sample size is a lot smaller, right? If we were to divide by 2 like we do for operators, then for certain maps like Lair, which just didn't get played very much, even 1 ban would be enough to consider certain operators viable, and so we're not going to do that. Now, it would be foolish to think that all bomb sites are equal. And for this tier list, I'm going to be considering primary, secondary, and tertiary sites as all relatively equal, right? So if an operator is played a lot on Church Arsenal on Clubhouse, I'm fine saying that is equivalent to an operator being played often on Gym and Bedroom. But it's probably not accurate to say that Church Arsenal and Gym Bedroom are considered to a bomb site like Bar Stage, which, despite what Flynn might want to tell you, is a dog shit bomb site that nobody actually wants to play. So instead, we're going to use a viable definition on bomb sites as well. And we're going to once again say that a bomb site is considered viable if it is played at least half as often as an average bomb site. So this is the exact same definition we use to define if an operator is viable. We're going to do the same thing on a bomb site. And then we're going to just completely ignore data on bomb sites that don't have a large enough sample size. So if we run this calculation, what that means is that we have 7 unviable bomb sites in our game. Those are going to be Armory Weapon on Lair, Archives Tellers on Bank, Server Archives on Consulate, Custom Supply on Border, Bar Stage on Club, Bathroom Bedroom on Sky, Kitchen Cafeteria on Nighthaven. All of those bomb sites, while some of them are actually playable, I think the Split site on Consulate is actually a pretty good site. I think Custom Supply is actually getting more play on Border. Even if they are decent bomb sites, even if they should be considered viable by some definitions, they just don't have the sample size to give accurate results. So we're going to cut them all out of our data set. We're not going to consider any rounds on that map, or on that site, I should say. This means of the 9 competitive maps, 7 of them have 3 viable sites, and then Chalet and Cafe are the only 2 maps where we're going to consider all 4 bomb sites as viable. We will be taking data from all bomb sites on Chalet and all bomb site on Cafe. So for each operator, I'm going to give them a viability score. I'm going to give them 1 point if they're considered viable on a bomb site with on a 3-site map, and I'm going to give them 0.75 points per bomb site on a 4-site map. Basically, what that means is if you're viable on every site on Cafe and you're viable on every site on Clubhouse, you get 6 points total, right? Every map is giving out exactly 3 points. Cutting the 4-site maps down to 0.75 will mean that every map, all 9 maps in the map pool, have equal weight in our equation. And then the bomb sites that we are considering are all equal within those maps. But being viable on Cafe top floor may not be the same as being viable on Clubhouse basement. And of course, you get no points if you were viable on an unviable bomb site, meaning that we have a maximum of 27 on our viability score and a minimum of 0. So now we have a way to rank operators based on how viable they are, how many different bomb sites they're actually going to be useful on. If an operator is useful on all the sites in all the games, 9 times 3, that's 27. If an operator is viable on none of the bomb sites, that's going to be a viability score of 0. So viability is important, but so is win rate, okay? I'm not just going to be looking at viability to create this tier list. We also want to know which operators are winning and which operators are losing. So we could just look at raw win rate for this, right? I could just take a look at win rate for an operator and consider that at its face value, but there are some problems with doing that. The first thing is that it's going to be really hard to compare attacking operators and defending operators if we do this, because On average, defense just wins a lot more than attackers. Overall, what did I say, 6,000 rounds or something? The defense won about 55% and the attackers won about 45%, right? That's the global average. The defense tend to be about 10 percentage points higher than the attackers do. So if we just look at attacking, or if we just look at win rate, it's going to be hard to compare attackers and defenders. It also is a little bit awkward because every bomb site has its own unique expected win rate and losing rate, right? On some sites, the defenders might be up as much as 60, 70, 80%. And on some bomb sites, the attackers are actually going to be favored because the bomb sites just aren't that good. To solve this, I'm going to make up my second stat in 30 minutes, and I'm going to make up a new stat that I'm going to be calling impact. An operator's impact is the difference in a bomb site's win rate when the operator is present versus when the operator is not present, okay? So we're basically going to be calculating how much an operator's presence in a round will change the win rate of a bomb site. Let's use another example. Capitao on Office Exhibition specifically has a win rate of 48.48%, okay? Capitao won 16 rounds on Office Exhibition this stage, and he lost 17 rounds. Now, attacks without Capitao had a win rate of just 34.86%. So attacks without Capitao won 61 times, and attacks without Capitao lost 114 times. That means despite having a negative win rate on Office Exhibition, Capitao has an impact of plus 13.63% because Capitao is improving the win rate when he is on the board by 13%, okay? So even though Capitao technically has a negative win rate on Office Exhibition, his impact is very good because pushes without Capitao typically go much worse than with him. Of course, it's going to be different for every bomb site, right? On some sites, Capitao might have an even higher impact than this. On some bomb sites, Capitao is going to have likely a negative impact. Impact could easily be a negative number, and for many operators, it will be. So we're going to give every operator an average impact score. To give that as a clear example, we're going to use Maestro, right? Maestro is considered viable on 3 bomb sites. That's it. That's the only point where he hit the threshold of viable. He was bomb site on Cafe Kitchen, Bank Basement, and Consulate Basement. On each of those sites, he actually had a negative impact as well. So on Cafe Kitchen, he was minus 0.5%. Same with Consulate Basement. On Bank, though, he was negative 3.5%. Again, this math, you don't really have to understand it, but broadly, we're calculating an average impact across the bomb sites, whilst also accounting for the fact that Cafe holds less weight than Bank and Consulate sites because Cafe is a 4-site map, the other sites are 3-site maps. I'm making a deliberate choice here not to really care about how many pick rates, right? Like if Maestro was played 1,000 times on Bank Basement, but only 100 times on Consulate Basement, I'm going to rate those as equal because I'm thinking that we're going to see Bank and Consulate approximately the same amount of times. All that matters is that an operator hits the viability threshold. So if an operator is viable, we're considering that equal to all other bomb sites. Whereas an operator is not viable, then we're just not going to look at the operator stats on that site. So this means that Maestro has an impact of negative 1.49%, and he has a viability score of 2.75, because 1 plus 1 plus 0.75 for the Cafe Kitchen is his viability, and impact is simply the average of those 3, scaled, of course, for Cafe having 4 sites instead of 3. Now that you've sat through all of the boring math, we can get to the final formula. We can finally talk about how we're going to be constructing the final score of every operator. This is a bit of a subjective process, right? Because while viability and impact, even those definitions are subjective, the way that we put them together is going to be up to myself. It's going to be my choice. It's my tier list. I get to decide. I decided like this. T is going to be our score. That's going to be our final score where we decide how many points we're giving each operator. I started to build this formula by pretending that every operator is playing about 100 rounds, right? So we're starting with 100. Then we're going to multiply that 100 by viability over 27. Remember, 27 is the maximum possible score for viability. So we're immediately going to scale that 100 rounds based on how many bomb sites we expect to see the operator in. We expect the operator to be viable in. Then, based on however many rounds we expect the operator to be playing, we're going to multiply that by the impact plus 50%, right? So that's going to be approximately how many rounds they're winning. It's not exactly winning because impact is comparative to the other bomb site, or comparative to the other operators. But we're going to multiply basically the win rate by the pick rate by 100. This accounts for the fact that some bomb sites are stronger than others. This accounts for the fact that some bomb sites are played more often than others. We don't want to rate bomb sites that are played more higher than bomb sites that aren't because they're all part of the meta. This is my decision. It's my tier list. This is what we're doing. All we've got to do now is assign the rankings, okay? This was also a bit of a subjective process. I defined the tiers based on what I thought were fair cutoffs, right? When there were ever large-ish gaps on the scores, I made a break in the tiers. It's not exact, right? In fact, I think the second or third biggest gap out of all the scores was the first place operator versus the second placed operator. I considered off that just making S tier the one lone operator, but that didn't really feel right. So I decided instead just to divide it into the big categories of S, A, B, C, D, and F. And then within each category, I wanted to have some fun. So I gave each operator F- to S+ as well. So broadly, just keep in mind that S tier is a score of 50 above. A tier is about a score of 45 to 50. B tier goes from about 25 to 45. C tier goes from about 15 to 25. It says 13 here, but that's simply because there are no operators between 13 and 15. And then anything below 15 points is considered D tier. Now you'll notice there's a bit of an asterisk on this, okay? Because 9 of our operators came up with a overall score of 0. They had a viability of nothing. They didn't hit the viability threshold on any of our bomb sites. And so I've taken those 9 operators and I've thrown them all into F tier. Now, how I rank those operators within F tier was also subjective, but I tried to do my best to still just align with the statistics. Effectively, what you have is that F+ tier has at least a 0.75 global pick rate. F tier has 2 operators that are around a 0.5% pick rate, and then the 3 operators in F- tier all had a flat pick rate of less than 0.3%. So without further ado, we've gone through the math, we've gone through all of the calculations, we can get to the good part. We're starting with F- tier. F- tier is a joke tier. These are 3 operators you should be never playing in actual serious matches. These operators either don't help or they actively hurt your team. And the first operator, number 74 of our total 74 operators, is going to be Thunderbird. In Stage 2, professional players chose defensive operators 29,620 total times. And not once did any of them ever click on Thunderbird. This is the worst op in the game. It was the only operator that wasn't brought even a single time, a pick rate of 0.00. Thunderbird, for me, is the only operator in the game whose ability actively helps the enemy just as much, if not more, than it helps your team. Imagine that you're playing Thunderbird and you're setting up a Kona station in an off-site, somewhat defensive position. Imagine you take a fight and you lose that fight, but you deal some damage. Okay, great. Maybe I died, but a teammate can easily trade because I put that guy down to like 0.5 HP, right? Wrong, because that player's just going to walk up to the position you were holding and heal from your own Kona station. Thunderbird is a operator that hurts your team more than it helps you. It doesn't even work much in the other direction because that's not really how attackers push, right? What happens typically, imagine an offsite position, maybe security on border, right? Typically, the attackers are going to commit everything to clear this spot, okay? They're going to push all 5 attackers to clear you out if they need to, because taking that part of the map is part of their goal, right? That's how they execute on the map. So they're going to take that control, even if it costs them 2, 3, 4 bodies. You, on the other hand, are only 1 body sitting on top of this Kona station. Maybe you'll get 1 heal halfway through a gunfight, assuming you don't get headshot, to be clear. Maybe you get 1 heal off, but they're still going to eventually clear you. Unless you can 1v5 their whole team, they're going to clear you. They're going to get the Kona station. Maybe you can try to only use the Kona stations in sight, but then that really limits your ability to return on the roam and play off site. Heals in general just aren't that good in Rainbow Six Siege because it's a one-shot headshot game. Thunderbird is completely worthless. She has a weak ability. That ability often helps the enemy more than it helps her. The gun in the secondary utility isn't even that bad, right? The AR that Thunderbird has is like pretty good. She's got a machine pistol, barbed wires and shield. Like, these are really good secondary utility, but it doesn't matter. When the primary utility is this fucking worthless, there's no reason to ever play Thunderbird. She's the worst op in the game. F-. In 73rd place, we have BlackBeard. I don't need to explain this one too much for you, right? BlackBeard's guns are trash. His shield is made of paper. The operator doesn't do anything. It was played 16 times across all of Stage 2, and it still had a win rate of just 44%. He doesn't even get the buff of having a larger inflated win rate because he has a low sample size. He's just horrible. 44% win rate is ridiculous. This operator is worthless, right? Doesn't get kills, doesn't provide any utility. It's a meme operator. I'm really looking forward to the rework. We should get a better BlackBeard, hopefully, I think next season, right? BlackBeard is supposed to be getting his rework. But BlackBeard is worthless, okay? There's no reason to ever play this operator. His ability doesn't work. It doesn't stop any bullets. And his guns themselves aren't even very strong. The last operator in F- tier is Rook. This is one that casual players might be a little surprised to see as one of the 3 worst operators in the game. Rook was played just 5 times across all of Stage 2 this stage. He did win more than he lost. He went 3-2. But frankly, there's just never a reason to ever actually play Rook. Rook is a worse version of Doc, and Doc is already not a very good operator. Doc at least has a niche where he can heal himself up and get through spam of nades or fire or any type of utility clear. Rook doesn't even have that. The way that healing works between Rook and Doc is very different. Rook has a wide spread of healing. Rook can give health to a small amount of health to a large amount of allies, whereas Doc's healing is more concentrated. But unconcentrated healing doesn't really do anything for you. Giving every player a little bit more health doesn't give you very much of an advantage in Rainbow Six Siege, a game with one-shot headshots. Being able to pick yourself up is kind of nice, but it's so rare that that ability actually comes into effect. On top of that, Rook doesn't even have the bailiff. Why they gave a secondary shotgun to Doc and not Rook is far beyond me. Rook is already the far worst operator. Healing is a weak ability. It's even weaker when it's spread out to all your teammates and not just focused on one player who can at least tank a bunch of damage. In theory, Rook at least doesn't harm your team like Thunderbird does, assuming you don't give the enemy Rook armor. But there's still no reason to play this operator. It's completely garbage. Don't play Rook. Next, we move on to F-tier operators. F-tier operators also don't really contribute anything. I have 2 operators in the F-tier. These are ops that don't really contribute anything util-wise, but at least they can often run around and get kills. The first operator in F-tier is Alibi. Alibi's ability is pretty garbage. You're basically never going to get any value out of Alibi's ability. The problem is that at a high level, players drone, right? And they're going to drone your Prisma clones out before they shoot them. They're not going to get surprised and panic and shoot the Alibi Prisma. With the sole exception of maybe you can place a Prisma in front of a window that the attackers are just blindly going to spam to shoot open the window anyways. That can get you pings, but it doesn't really matter because if you get pinged, you're still outside the building. Barring like a crazy spawn peek, the defenders aren't going to be able to do anything off of that very limited information that they're getting off of a random spam bit of information from an Alibi clone. Even if you want a spawn peek off of an Alibi ping, the attackers are by definition already looking at the windows. You're unlikely to be in a good position and they know they're getting pinged, so there's just very little reason to... It's just very, very unlikely you're ever going to get value out of an Alibi that you can actually utilize. Alibi also has pretty bad secondary gadgets. Obs blockers and beepers are probably the 2 worst defense secondary gadgets in the game. Beepers are okay. Obs blockers are almost completely worthless. So util-wise, Alibi is just completely irrelevant. The MX Storm is a pretty great gun. She's a 3-speed, and she's got the bailiff as well. So she's got decent weaponry around her, but being a 3-speed and having good weapons is not enough to make you a viable operator in 2024. Maybe if she had better secondary utility, she could be good. But at the moment, Alibi brings nothing to the team in terms of util and is sitting as our fourth worst operator in the game. Next, we get to an operator who is usually put far lower on these tier lists. But I'm putting Cav in 70th place, which may be a new height for Cav mains of all the tier lists you may have seen. As I mentioned when we were going over our formula, Cav has the highest raw win rate with 17 wins out of 25 rounds. But I think that mostly comes from teams that are already dominating the match. They're already up like 5-0, 6-0, 6-1, and they're just trying to style on their opponents by bringing out the Cav. This is the ultimate disrespect operator. Any team doing decently well on attack, any team half decent at droning is going to be able to find Cav. And the big problem with Caviera is once she's droned out, she has no tools to actually help her win fights. Unlike Vigil and Mozzie, she has no tools to help her avoid being droned, and she also has no tools to win raw gunfights. Her guns are good at what they do. They're good for flanks, right? The pistol does a lot of damage. But in a fair one-on-one gunfight, the shotgun and SMG are often not going to cut it. I'm not going to favor Cav in the vast majority of those fights that she takes. In order for Cav to get value, she must be misdroned. And if she gets an interrogation, that's great. Interrogations are actually an insane amount of intel. It's a very, very powerful ability. It can do so much for you, but you're never going to get that against opponents, against good opponents, right? Against competent opponents, you'll never really beat in Cav interrogations. Maybe once in a blue moon, a good team will misdrone something that realistically should never be played by a Cav, and you can get off a surprise factor interrogation, but that's so ridiculously rare. It's not worth relying on. Cav, a fun op, but never going to be useful in serious situations. Next, we move on to the F+ tier. And I think we're out of the genuinely terrible operators. F+ tier operators actually do contribute value in my mind. They actually do bring something to help the team and to help themselves. The problem with the operators in F+ tier is that they are drastically outclassed by other operators or just standard utility. And so there's no reason to actually bring these ops. But if you did, you'd at least be getting value. And I think the first operator here is going to be probably the most controversial F tier pick. I got Iana in F+ tier. Other than BlackBeard, Iana was the least picked attacker in all of Stage 2. The problem with Iana is that everything she does, other operators do better. Do you want an entry? Go play Ashe. She's got 3 times the explosives and is actually a 3-speed. Oh, you want intel? Well, you can use regular drones, which will often stay alive way longer than your clone and can be pinged on by teammates. Or you can just play a Deimos, who will get live active pings that you can actually use to take good gunfights. Dokkaebi can help you find players if you don't know where they are. There's just nothing that Iana really brings to the table that helps her out. Iana's primary gadget is absolutely terrible. The Gemini is outclassed on pretty much all respects by drones. You're not really going to get value out of it. Maybe for 0.5 seconds, you'll see some bit of information before the drone gets shot, and then it's going to recharge too. Iana's pretty outclassed on weapons as well, right? Not the worst weapons in the game, but outclassed entirely by Ashe, and I would argue even by IQ and some of the other kind of entry-focused operators. And every single patch, it seems like Ubisoft is removing more of her utility. She had nades, she lost nades. She had flashes, she lost flashes. She's down to just EMPs and smokes. And these secondary gadgets are okay, but they're not what you necessarily want on an entry operator. EMPs are kind of a garbage secondary util in general. They can be useful. They're not complete garbage, but they're certainly lower on the tier list of secondary gadgets. And smokes are good, but they're good for like late round executes. You don't want smokes on an entry operator. That's not often going to be useful unless you're saving Iana until the very end of the round. But then what the fuck are you using Iana for anyways? Just bring in different operators with smokes. Even if a teammate has already picked Ashe and you want to play like secondary entry, get on Deimos or even Striker. You'll be bringing far more utility for your team. If Iana was removed from the competitive build of the game, it would take weeks for anybody to notice. Nobody plays this op. This op doesn't get any use. I don't think it's actively bad, but there's always better choices than bringing a Iana. Next in F+ tier, we have Zero. Just for a note, obviously, there was a new patch a couple of days ago, and all the data from that I'm pulling from does not include data post-patch. So that means the Iana buff that hit the patch is not taken into effect for this tier list. That also means the Zero buff is not being taken into effect for this tier list. With that said, I don't think 2 extra cameras is going to help Zero. Whether he has 4 or whether he has 6, I don't think this operator really brings you much. Zero runs into a very similar issue as Iana, and that attacker intel just isn't very valuable in the primary gadget spot, because every single operator in the game comes equipped with immediately 2 drones, and these 2 drones will do the job of gathering intel just as well, if not sometimes better, than the primary gadgets of Iana or Zero. Zero's gadgets are a little bit interesting. They have the ability to zap other gadgets, but this is pretty irrelevant because any gadget that matters on the defensive side that can be zapped, like a Bandit battery, a Kaid claw, is generally going to have other defenders playing near it who will just shoot the camera before the camera can do any zaps to clear the util. Even if you clear the util, you're going to get 1 clear off and then the cam's going to be shot because it takes 10 years for the zapper to recharge. That means that you're just going to get Bandit tricked anyways. Maybe you can clear out a Kaid claw and you can get some value out of that, but there's so many other ways to get Kaid claws off of walls that the cameras don't really do a good job of clearing utility better than anything else. The guns of Zero aren't great. His recoil is kind of a lot. Secondary gadgets of Hard Breach and Claymores both have their time and place, but they also aren't like high on the tier list of secondary util. I don't know, man. Just drone things. This operator's really bad. Next in F+, we have Sens. Sens makes me sad, right? Because their ability is so cool, yet so horrible at the same time, right? Sens has such a sick concept for ability, right? A vertical line of coverage is that you can plant behind is really intriguing. It gets the brain working for some cool strategies. The problem is that Sens walls, these projectors, get countered by literally everything, dude. Whether that's bulletproofs that can see through the Sens wall, warden glasses can see through the Sens wall, and just to add insult to injury, impacts somehow also take down the Sens wall. Why? Ubisoft, why? This is already a worse gadget than a smoke grenade, because a smoke grenade covers in multiple directions. You can plant inside of a smoke, and then you can't be denied from above. You can't be denied from behind. It's going to cover that visual line of sight against all different angles. A Sens wall is one angle, and for some reason, it can be impacted away. This makes no sense. This is not a nerf that the Sens wall needed, and it's almost mind-boggling to me that Sens, since released, has not been buffed the entire time that they've been in the game. It feels like every couple of months, some top team will break out a Sens strat, and we'll all get excited, and we'll be like, oh my god, guys, Sens is being played, and then the wall will get impacted once, or there'll be a warden on the board, and we'll all remember why the operator's dog shit. It's just not good. Sens was played 14 times on games on Chalet and 11 times on Kitchen. If Sens had been played 4 times more on the games bomb site or twice more on the kitchen bomb site on Chalet, Sens would have hit the threshold of being viable and thus would have made it out of F tier. But with Sens win rate being below average, I'm not surprised that they didn't hit that threshold anyways. Sens is extremely niche in the places where they're useful, and the places where they're useful, they're typically just outclassed by smoke grenades anyways. At the very top of F tier, we've got Thorn. Thorn gets outclassed hard by every other trap operator, and trap operators in general aren't considered to be very high on the tier list because they're very easy for competent players to drone out and be ready for. The Thorn trap itself deploys so slowly, it's never realistically going to get a kill. Every decent player is going to turn around and shoot the Thorn gadget, or if they're in a place where they can't, they'll push up and get out of the range, or maybe they'll just jump back and get out of the range once again, jump out the window, walk out the doorway, whatever they did to get into the trap radius. The trap is more of an alarm system than something that's actually going to deal any significant amount of damage. The gun is fine, but not great. Probably worse than most other trap operators' guns. The secondary utility from Thorn is actually kind of nice. Barbed wire and shield are both pretty high value secondary utilities, and you do rarely see Thorn get brought out when teams need shields. But without any decent secondary shotgun or any other way to contribute to the team's setup, she's usually not the right pick. There are better operators that bring barbed wire. There are better operators that bring shield. Yeah, this operator just doesn't really have any place in the meta. Trap operators in general aren't very strong. And being the worst of all trap operators is not an enviable spot to be. Next on, we're going to move to the tier of D-. D- operators are usually actually pretty effective, but they are so niche that they're really only usable on like 1 or 2 bomb sites max. And our first operator that doesn't have a viability score of 0, bit of a surprise for me, is Jager. I was actually pretty shocked at how low the formula gave Jager's overall score. The problem is Jager's win rate is horrible. Jager has an impact of negative 8.23%. Again, with lower sample sizes, you expect these numbers to hit the higher and lower extremes, but that is the worst impact of any operator that I calculated. Jager just loses so many fucking sites, even compared to other operators on the same sites. Jager hit a viability score only on Cafe top floor, Cafe reading, and Chalet top floor, which means that his only strategies that are actually viable are holding down Pixel on Cafe and holding down the bathtub on Chalet. Two spots that are decent, but are certainly not widespread enough to bump up his viability more than that. He had a 45% win rate on his Pixel bomb sites, averaged out, so that's pretty low just to begin with. And then on Chalet top floor, his win rate was down to 28%, with 5 wins and 13 losses. So the amount that he was brought and the amount that he lost on Chalet top floor is really what's hurting him the most here. Really the problem with Jager is he's just so much worse than Wamai. Right? Wamai is also a 2-speed. Wamai has a strictly better primary gadget. It just blocks far more, and you can do more with it, and it blocks Capitao bolts. Wamai's magnets are so much better than ADS's. On a rare occasion, you will see Jager brought over Wamai when you really need a bulletproof, but that's really the only reason that you see Jager being brought instead of Wamai. The vast majority of Jager picks are brought alongside Wamai when you need just a fuck ton of anti-nade, anti-flash utility. And the problem for Jager is there just aren't that many spots in today's meta where you need a trillion anti-nade. Flores also just makes Jager want to jump off a roof. Imagine your entire role as an operator is to protect one deployable shield, and then a Flores drone just boop, 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 rolls up and destroys it. It's horrible. Jager's in a really bad spot right now. He desperately needs to be nerfed. There's no reason to bring Jager right now, other than maybe playing Pixel Shield on Cafe, maybe Cocktail on Cafe, but that's about it. Slightly above Jager, we have Kali. As previously discussed, Kali actually has quite a good win rate. The problem is she's so niche that she doesn't get any higher on this list. Kali only recorded herself as viable on 2 bomb sites, those being Gym Bedroom on Clubhouse and then CEO on Bank. Both bomb sites where you see Azami and Castle brought very, very commonly. Countering Azami and Castle is actually very, very good. Azami and Castle, as you'll see through this tier list, are very good operators, and having direct counters to those operators is great. The problem is that the sniper rifle is just horrible, right? I mean, you very rarely find yourself in gunfights where you want to have a sniper as your primary. You'll see strats where Azami will be repelling on Garage to counter construction, or maybe repelling on Lobby Repel, or the CEO repels on Bank to stop players in Trump or deep inside the site. But in general, long angle fights don't happen in Siege. Defenders aren't going to give them to you, barring spawn peaks. And so the sniper rifles in this game just aren't considering very good at all. Again, this is before the buffs, before the newest patch, but I don't think it'll matter much. Kali has some hype plays, but she's just too niche to get herself out of D tier, and so she's here. Next in D- tier, we have Ella. Similar to Jager, Ella's really only good on one map and in one spot, and that's Skyscraper in Geisha. Ella's 2 viability score comes from being viable on Tea Karaoke and Barbecue Kitchen, where the Grismots plus F2 or Scorpion is actually a pretty good combination for holding down Geisha. Unlike Jager, Ella actually rocks a positive win rate in this spot. She's got 18 round wins holding Geisha and only 10 round losses. So that is a pretty good win rate, and I genuinely think that is a niche that Ella fills quite well, and better than almost any other operator. The problem is Ella has no range at all, right? The Scorpion is impossible to control long range. The FO12 hits hard as hell for about 3 feet and doesn't do much beyond that. Ella's primary weapons are just designed for really close combat engagements, and I mean really close combat engagements. The Grismots are fine. They're better than Beepers, but not by a ton. So the Grismots don't really do much as far as trap operators go. They're not dealing any damage. The stun that they apply is annoying, but you can still win gunfights when stunned by the Grismots. It's not like a Dreadmine where you get completely blind or anything like that. The secondary gadgets are pretty good. Again, having a shield at your disposal, having barbed wire can be really good. So there are times where you'll want to take Ella, but there's not very many, and typically there's going to be better options that can bring both of those. The pistol is the long-range weapon. Yeah, exactly. That's not what you want to be playing with for long range. Next in D-, you have Tachanka. Tachanka is a worse smoke in 99% of situations, but in 1% of situations, he can be very good. He's another operator that is viable on just 2 bomb sites. We'll talk about those sites in a bit. Tachanka's utility is pretty good, right? Solid destruction with the LMG. A 3 armor is probably what you want for most of your anchor operators. He comes with a shield, which is very good, especially for anchors. And he gets a machine pistol. He gets, honestly, quite a good loadout. The problem is that Tachanka's primary gadget is so fucking bad, and it's so outclassed by both Smoke and Goyos, and even to an extent, C4s. The problem with Tachanka's primary gadget, it just takes forever to pull out and put back. Unlike Smoke, who can just chuck his Toxic Babes, or Goyo, who puts them down and then keeps his gun up, Tachanka's got to actively switch between his primary weapon and his Shamika launcher, and that takes ages. On top of that, the fire from his fire launcher doesn't do that much damage and doesn't last that long. So you basically constantly have to have the fire launcher out. You have to constantly be spamming it. It takes forever to reload. It's so much worse than Goyo. It's so much worse than Smoke. The main site that you'll see Tachanka being brought out is typically Consulate's top floor, CEO. He's got a 50% win rate on Consulate top floor. That's pretty good. I've seen this hold go wrong a couple of times. If you're playing Tachanka close on the CEO window, in reception area, often the fire that you shoot, I've seen teams try to bounce it off the desk and deny the into window plant spot. Often that doesn't reach, right? it can be hard to aim those Tachanka fire grenades sometimes. And so I've seen Tachankas literally just troll because the fire doesn't reach the CEO repel plant spot, and then you've completely wasted the whole point of the operator. But I think in general, Tachanka that gets played more towards meeting, by the meeting window, kind of between the two sites on a hard wall, can be effective on that site. I do think it's a good operator to choose in that one scenario. And then I was most surprised that he's actually incredible on lair top floor. He probably has the best win rate of any bombs, of any operator on any viable site on lair top floor. He's played lair top floor 13 times through stage 2, and he won it 12 of those 13 times. The first team to run Tachanka lair top floor was actually PSG Talon. Soldier played this operator at first, but Sonics have run this strat quite a bit. Beast Coast have run this strat. Bleed have run this strat, among other teams. Most teams have caught on that Tachanka top floor on lair is actually really, really good. And I am looking forward to seeing how that evolves in Montreal. That'll be interesting to see if we can up Tachanka's overall viability bomb sites from 1 to 2. But we need more sample size to really talk about Tachanka on lair before we get there. 61st place, I've got Maestro. Maestro is slow. He's got really stationary utility that pretty much has to go inside the bomb site so that you can deny plants, and the sites and the bubbles don't just get cleared. And Maestro's secondary util for an anchor is just complete garbage. Barbed wire, impacts, obs blockers. Most of the operators Tachanka is competing against for this slot are like Mira or Smoke or Warden or Tachanka, and all of these operators have generally better secondary, if not just as good secondary utility than Maestro. Maestro is considered viable on 3 sites instead of just 2, but his win rate is much worse on those sites. He's considered viable on Cafe, Consulate, and Bank, all of those only in the basement. The biggest problem for Maestro is that Brava exists, and so does Attacker Repick. Maestro's utility is pretty great if you can get those cams to stay up. 3 bulletproof cameras that can deny plants sounds really good in theory, but if they get hacked, you end up in a terrible situation where not only is your intel gone, but it's given to the attackers and you can't destroy it. Usually, if Brava hacks, like, say, a Valkyrie cam or even a bulletproof camera, you can shoot those cams and then it's basically just like the attackers destroyed it. But with Maestro, you can't destroy those cameras without wasting a bulletproof or something. Yeah, you can melee it, maybe, depending on where it's placed, but even that would mean that they can still open the scanner and see what else is going on at the bomb site. You're giving so much util away to the attackers if a Brava hacks these cams. And you can't even deny that intel if the Brava does hack it. Maestro has a below-average win rate on every single site that he is considered viable on. I think he can work. I've seen good Maestro strats on, like, Bank Basement. Obviously, Cafe Kitchen can be good. Consulate Basement, like, sure. Like, these are decent sites for Maestro, no doubt. But I think generally there are better choices. His win rate really doesn't do him any favors. This operator just leaves a lot to be desired at the moment. The last op in D- is Mozzie. Mozzie is carried pretty hard all the way to 60th place just because he has a 6-2 record defending Cafe top floor. 8 rounds on Cafe top floor is just viable. Just enough rounds played to be considered viable. The viability threshold on that bomb site ends up being 7.2. So had he been played 1 fewer times, he probably would be much lower on this list and have a much lower score. But because he hit that threshold, he does get all the way up to 60th place. Mozzie is also considered viable on Mining and Dining, and then Open Area on Bank. Pretty much just the roof hatches on Cafe and then the printer window on Bank are the few spots in Siege where the pests are both hard to dodge and annoying to destroy. In most other situations, Mozzie pests are relatively easy to get past, either by destroying them, EMPing them, or just tossing your drone past them or going another direction. Ignoring his primary gadget, Mozzie also struggles. He's a 2-speed without amazing guns. His guns are relatively weak compared to a lot of the other roamers in the game. He does have pretty good secondary util, C4, impact, barbed wire. This is all great secondary gadgets. But we're kind of in a meta right now where operators like Legion and Vigil are just so powerful that Mozzie gets outclassed in the vast majority of the situations he's playing in. And he's probably overrated even in this list. Again, this list was made before the patch notes came out, before the updates came out. I actually think having 4 pests and having impacts could be a big buff to Mozzie, and I do expect him to jump up with the recent buffs, but Those buffs weren't taken into consideration for the statistics, so this is a pre-buff Mozzie patch list. I'm honestly really excited to see how he does with the upgrade. Next, we have the D-tier operators. The D-tier operators are mostly operators that just don't do their jobs very well. Or they're really, really niche like the D- operators, but maybe are usable on a few more sites. The first D operator I have is Fuze. Fuze is such a stupid operator because for his entire existence, Fuze would be an F-tier operator, right? For like 9 years, Fuze has sat in the very basement of operator tier lists. He's been completely unusable. But at the very start of Siege release, almost 10 years ago, some guy at Ubisoft, who before they had a coherent design philosophy for the game, decided, fuck it, let's just throw a shield on this guy. Let's just give Fuze a shield. Why not? We're not going to give a shield to any other operator in the game who also has primary weapons. Let's just give Fuze a shield for no reason. And now we're in a meta where 1 to 2 shields get banned every single game, and even the worst shield in Rainbow Six Siege is worth bringing from time to time when shields are as fucking busted as they are. Fuze's ability is irrelevant. Cluster charges don't do anything. There are some really niche strats like on Chalet where you can try to use the cluster charges to get a bunch of soft breach, but with Ram being added to the game, you don't really see that strat much anymore either. The cluster charges are too random and too hard to use to be actually good for util clear, and they give way too much warning to be useful for kills. The cluster charges don't do anything. Usually when Fuze gets brought, you don't even see the cluster charges getting used. Fuze is considered viable on all 3 sites of Lair, mostly due to a small sample size and very strong shields on that site. Plus, he's being considered viable on Kitchen on Cafe. Fuze's rifle is irrelevant. You're bringing Fuze to the shield, so you're not going to have that. The cluster charges don't matter. Smokes are kind of nice. You might be able to help get some plants with this guy. Smokes plus planting on a shield is quite a good combo that have really helped out the other shields on this list. He's basically Blitz without a flash. That is all. If Blitz is banned or if Monty is banned, then you want to run 2 shields. Maybe it's worth running this, running Fuze. But generally, he's pretty terrible. Being Blitz without a flash is good enough for D tier, though. Next in D tier, you have the Bane of Ranked. You've got Jackal. Jackal's primary ability helps out with roam clear. And what you'll learn from watching this tier list is that having a roam clear primary ability is actually really good. The secondary shotgun is also nice on Jackal, plus smokes are a really cool piece of utility. Jackal's biggest problem is that he competes for a spot on the attacker lineup with Dokkaebi, Deimos, and Lion, all of who do Jackal's job better than Jackal does. Jackal's guns aren't very good compared to the other roam clear operators. His utility is harder to use than Dokkaebi's. His ping is too random compared to Deimos. He just struggles to compete, I think, alongside some of the other really strong roam clearing operators. Usually when Jackal gets brought in competitive, he's brought alongside an operator like Lion or Dokkaebi, or when one or more of those operators is getting banned out. And even then, Jackal's really only used in strats where the defense are committing very hard to the roam game. Nighthaven Basement is his most common site. It's a large map where the defense pretty much have to roam on that basement bomb site. And thankfully, the one anchor that's in the site is unlikely to come to the top floor and leave a bunch of annoying footprints that you would accidentally scan, and then it doesn't even help you with your roam clear. Jackal's just kind of struggling with the way that he gets that information, right? Live pings are super good. Live pings are really helpful. But because you don't always know whose footprints you're scanning, and because you can accidentally waste his util on anchor operators, and because you never know if you've actually cleared out all the operators or if you've only forced 1 or 2 roamers back to site, Jackal's util is just like really hard to use. His gun's not great. Mostly just outclassed. Next is an operator we talk about quite a lot on this stream. I've put her in D tier. It's Osa. Ironically, Osa has one of the best impact scores in the game. I built the damn formula, and I still couldn't help Osa from having a ridiculously good impact at a plus 8.24%. But don't celebrate too early, Osa lovers. Because in my opinion, Osa is an operator that separates good competitive teams from bad competitive teams. When you look at the global data, all 9 regions weighted equally, Osa had the second best win rate of all attackers, winning 51% of rounds. Only Osa and Kali were above 50% win rate on attack when you look at the stats globally. That sounds pretty good. But when you restrict the dataset to only North America, Europe, and Brazil, she falls all all the way down to being the third worst operator by pure attacking win rate, only losing to Maverick and Fuze when it comes to the raw win rate. The problem with Osa is that good teams are consistently going to counter her shield. Bad teams are always going to be trying to use this operator to go for plants, and she's just not a very good operator trying to get plants onto the ground. Take a look at T-Karaoke, okay? This was one of the 4 sites where the formula considered Osa to be viable, okay? Globally, for all regions, she's counted as 11% impact. She's improving the win rate on that site by 11%. But in North America, Europe, and Brazil, she's got a minus 13% impact on T-Karaoke. Again, this is because the Osa strat of walking in top black, planting inside of Karaoke is 100% counterable, but sometimes you have to do the right thing, and sometimes doing the right thing is hard, right? You've got to play smoke and smoke out the shield. You've got to throw impacts or play operators down below. There are a lot of ways to counter that Osa strategy that walks in top black, but bad teams maybe aren't going to do those strategies, and because of this, Osa gets a very high win rate on certain sites. Armory Locker's Archives is another site where Osa is considered viable. And literally there are clips out there of this stage where players are trick shot killing Osa when going for the Archives plant. I watched a round in Mena this stage where a player was in Fountain. They tossed a C4. The C4 didn't go over the bookshelf. It instead went under the bookshelf, through a gap in the floor, and blew up Osa from below. A bonkers strategy, but it just kind of showcases how many ways there are to deny that plant. Globally still, though, this bomb site has a positive win rate for Osa. In the big 3 regions, Osa's sitting at a -2 impact. It's not a positive strategy being brought in Europe, North America, or Brazil. I have an entire YouTube video talking about why I don't think Osa's a very good operator and why I think she's generally overrated by pro players and even competitive teams as a whole. To summarize that video, Osa is not a very good operator for planting the defuse kit. There's too many counters. Even if you throw an impact or a C4 and Osa avoids it, she loses her utility, so she's still suffering even if you C4 nobody. Blitz and Monty just do the job of planting undercover so much better. The one time where Osa is, in my opinion, genuinely valuable is when she's not planting. She's either being a distraction or she's covering somebody else's cutoff. That's why you see her pretty often on bank defense. You put an Osa in garage, you plant from server. These are the Osa strats I think are okay. But too many people just run Osa plant strategies. They have such a low win rate. I don't like it. And it is a thing I rant about more than anything else on this stream. Next, we have Pulse. Kind of surprised to see Pulse down here. The problem is that Pulse is globally one of only 3 defenders alongside Jager and Alibi with a below 50% win rate. Pulse's win rate is just horrible in this stage. Despite the fact that I think Pulse is generally considered to be a pretty decent operator, the stats don't agree. Pulse is very situational, but I think in theory he should be very good on certain bomb sites, similar to Tachanka, similar to Ella, right? Situational for sure, but at least giving you good values when he's being brought out. In actuality, I think Pulse strats are generally very readable, and if you're below a bomb site on Pulse, you're not doing much else to actually help your teammates, and you're relying on the other 4 players of your team to stall the round into the last few seconds when you can finally be impactful and C4 to stop the plant. I think Pulse, similar to Osa, is another operator that a lot of people are probably just playing wrong. I think in the smaller regions especially, a lot of teams are just running Pulse as an operator to deny plants, and they're not really doing much for the rest of the rounds. I think a Canadian style of Pulse where you're IGLing and you're feeding a bunch of information to your team probably has a lot better win rate. I couldn't really calculate that. But I would imagine that style of Pulse ends up being a lot more effective than how most teams play Pulse. I will say by far the most successful viable bomb site for Pulse was actually Bathroom on Border. Bathroom and Tellers, where that style of play is pretty much the only style of play you see Pulse being brought out for, right? On that site, you'll probably put Pulse like in Workshop, and he'll call information to the roamers to the top floor who will try to help out. You're not obviously going below Bathroom to deny plants with a C4. There is no below Bathroom. There's no basement on that site, obviously. Maybe an indicator that kind of IGL style of Pulse is better than how most people are playing it. Piano on Consulate was Pulse's most common site, and also had a better than average win rate. But I think a lot of people, when they see a Pulse on Piano on Consulate, are simply going to plant on the hard floor, and it can be difficult sometimes to arc the C4 through the floorboards. A lot of teams will just clear out the Pulse. I don't know. It's not a bad strat. I think Pulse has his uses, but statistically, this is an operator that has really struggled this stage. Next in D tier, we have an op that actually performs quite well in his admittedly very narrow niche. 40% of all Doc picks came on either CCTV Cache for holding Rafters or an Armory Locker's Archives for holding Security. 40% of all Doc picks. And it's interesting because those two styles of holds are kind of different, right? On CCTV Cache, Doc had a plus 22% impact holding on to Rafters. On CCTV Cache, it is purely a I'm going to stall out, I'm going to survive for as long as possible strategy. On positions like CCTV Cache or even Library Corner on Chalet, the goal for playing Doc is to sit in one spot where you cannot be shot and eat frag grenades and eat Capitao arrow bolts, right? Just heal through the damage. We talked about why Rook is garbage. Rook can't do this. Doc can instead heal through it. Doc is happy to sit in these spots, soak up all the damage, survive. Now all of a sudden, I've both wasted your utility and I've also stayed alive. Sometimes this fails because somebody walks in and kills you anyways because you don't have your gun up, or maybe they can throw in some utility that you aren't able to heal through. You know, it's not a foolproof strategy, but we do see Doc in that niche, and he tends to perform pretty well when he's doing that. On Armory Locker's Archives, you're less trying to like heal through Capitao and grenade spam, and you're more just playing it entirely for the long angle on the gun. Having the scope to take the long angle fights and just play solo for the guns is kind of all you need to do about Armory Locker's Archives. If you're playing inside security on border, you're playing to die most likely. You want to be able to swing and take long angle fights and be unpredictable, and you don't really need util to help yourself do that. You want to be fighting attackers before they enter the building when you're playing security on border. And so any util in the building, such as maybe a dread mine from Fenrir, isn't really going to be helpful. Maybe if somebody does walk in, you can have teammates put utility up there, but the raw gun skill from Doc can be very helpful. And then, of course, being able to stim yourself up if you take a gunfight, take some damage, but win it is also pretty nice. Doc had overall a plus 17% impact on Armory Locker's Archives. So an operator who is quite good in his niche, but very, very niche. Our last operator in D tier before we get to D+, on the way to beat Doc inside of security in border, you may decide to rush the sandwich window with an Amaru hit, and that's exactly what Amaru is brought for most often than not. Amaru is considered viable on Consulate top floor, Consulate piano, Bank top floor, border top floor, and then mining and dining on cafe. But Consulate top floor is by far the most common bomb site that you're going to see Amaru being brought on. Amaru has a plus 15% impact on Consulate top floor, and it's probably the most interesting strat that Amaru has in the game. On most other sites like Bank top floor or border top floor, you're typically going to be bringing Amaru to rush, maybe get some kills, flash in, maybe plant the defuse kit. On Consulate, it's a bit of a different game because Consulate is the only top floor site of the game where you've got a really strong plant spot inside the Consulate window and also just inside like the meeting window. What you'll see Amaru players often do is Gara hook up into the window, start planting, beta Toxic Babe, and jump back out. And repeat that 3 or 4 times until all the utility is wasted, and eventually get the plant down. Amaru's unique ability to go from the floor to inside the building in record time can be really impactful and really good. I like Amaru a lot as an operator. I think a lot of people see her as just an operator with a gun that can get into sight fast and rush and get a bunch of kills, and she can certainly do that. But with the introduction of Consulate, we've seen some really cool strategies evolving with Amaru. I think it's an operator that is often underlooked by casual players because maybe they see her for the gun, but they don't see her for the express utility. And yeah, I don't know. I think the Consulate strat of Amaru is really, really sick, and I hope we see more stuff like that. It's unfortunate there aren't more bomb sites where like that kind of plant on the top floor strategy is super, super common. Next up, we have the D+ tier. D+ has 2 operators that are often considered worthless by kind of casual players, but actually have quite a few, or a couple of situations where they can be quite effective. The first D+ operator is Oryx. I think at first glance, Oryx looks like he should be down with like Alibi and Cav in F tier as a defender with really no utility, but a good gun. But in reality, I think his jump and his dash can actually be quite useful in a few very niche situations. Oryx is considered viable on every bomb site on border, where gunfights are kind of all that matters. And you've got a couple of really good sites, really good hatches for flanking. So jumping up the security hatch can be great for flanking. I've seen teams jump up the like the small office hatch inside of lockers. There's some cool flanks you can do with Oryx on the hatches. And then outside of border, you typically see Oryx mostly brought on open area on bank. The ability to jump up elevators into like the canto position for a flank can be really cool sometimes. The dash, I think, is less useful than the jump. But the dash can be good too sometimes if you're playing in a very isolated position and you want to get back to site. Often it's really hard as a roamer to get past a cutoff player, and you kind of just have to fight your way out or die. Unless you're playing Tubarão. Oryx can try to dash past an angle, and I've seen that work before for certain positions on certain maps. It's not the best, but Oryx is typically brought on a few different sites and actually tends to have quite a good win rate, as people don't really expect the Oryx flank very often. So not a bad operator by any means. The other operator in D+ is Glaz. Glaz gets a worse rap than I think is deserved, because Glaz can be really hard to play well, but at the end of the day, there's no denying that he is probably the best op in the game at just holding one angle on attack. Border is by far Glaz's best map. He's got pocket strats for rushes on Archives, and he's got pocket strats for rushes on Bathroom. What more is there to say other than an attacking operator that can see through smokes, right? If you know you only have to cover one angle, which is what you do when you're rushing Bathroom or you're rushing Archives, then smoking something off and holding it with a Glaz makes it basically unbeatable. Even a Warden peeking that angle is probably going to lose to a Glaz as long as Glaz is holding the right thing. We also see Glaz get used sometimes on basement sites to cover smoke plants. You'll see that on Chalet often if there's a snowmobile push with smoke. You'll see it on Consulate often if there's like a garage push with smoke. These strats are often not the greatest, but they can certainly work if you can vary your plant spot up quite a bit or if you can avoid C4s. Kind of a gimmicky setup, of course, kind of a gimmicky operator, but we see some cool stuff with Glaz, and the win rate's pretty good. Plus 1.14 impact is better than a lot of ops on this list. So credit where credit is due. Those type of strategies are often not too bad coming out of Glaz. Now we move into C-. C- also only has 2 operators, and the C- operators are generally generalists who are kind of underwhelming, but are played on a lot of bomb sites. The first C- operator is Sentry. Sentry has snuck his way into C tier, mostly because he's just an operator that is viable on a large range of sites, but that still doesn't bring him anywhere near his counterpart in Striker. The big reason why Sentry is in C and Striker we will not see for a while on this tier list is that Striker has a lot of synergies that Sentry just does not have, right? When you think about attacking secondary util, there's a lot of ways that utility can be used with each other. You can flash out magnets and then nade out a shield. You can EMP a mute jammer and then can opener open a wall. Defender utility just doesn't really have synergies like that. You could maybe set up like barbed wire and beepers somewhere, but it doesn't really give you much more value than just barbed wire or beepers alone. Instead of using synergies and playing solo, Sentry is usually just brought to fill holes in a defense, right? Maybe all 4 of your other operators are locked in when you're building a strat, but you really need barbed wire and a bulletproof on like gym and bedroom. Okay, maybe Sentry's the right pick there. Or maybe you really want a shield and you really want beepers to defend the top floor of Chalet when the bomb site is games. Okay, maybe Sentry's the right pick there. But in general, you don't need 6 secondary utility pieces on defense. And you can generally find that with other operators that bring better primary utility. The secondary shotgun also carries some weight. It can be hard to get secondary shotguns on the defense. You'll find that a lot of operators with secondary shotguns are very high on this tier list. So the fact that Sentry has one of those is certainly valuable, but on his own just isn't very powerful. And if you're not bringing much powerful utility on the defense, even in niche situations, you're really not going to be worth picking the most of the time. Now, even if I show up to stream tomorrow, and none of you do, I still know that I won't have fallen off as hard as Solis. Solis has fallen from maybe the best, or at least top 2, top 3 defender in the game to C- tier, and I've put them 50th in terms of all ops in the game. Not being able to see drones in prep phase and not having impacts kind of just makes Solis' life miserable as a roamer. You're just not really viable as a full-on roamer exclusively, right? Before Solis got hit with the nerfs, Solis could be played on almost any site as a roamer that denies heavy amounts of drones and can just run around without being spotted. Now, without having the ability to see drones when they are active or see drones in the prep phase, Solis kind of is only being brought on bomb sites where plant denial is the goal. She's basically just a better pulse. Piano on Consulate is also her most common site, similar to how it is for Pulse. But again, a lot of people are typically just planting on the hard floor instead of knowing that there was a Solis down below and planting on the soft floor instead. You do see a couple of other bomb sites where Solis is being brought out, but in general, you're not finding a lot of value outside of like stopping smoke plants and stuff, right? We see a little bit of play on like lair basement or like border ventilation workshop, where she can get value from shooting drones and also get value from like stopping a smoke plant. They're stopping a plant from like above. But that's kind of her only niche, right? And I think generally if you're trying to stop a smoke plant from above, Warden is going to be a better option overall because you get a shield, you get better weaponry. I don't know. A big map like Lair, drone denial can help quite a bit, but it's rare that we see Solis be the best option for roamers when there are so many other good roamers already. Next, we'll move on to the C-tier operators. C-tier operators are mostly ops that just don't really get played. Either they are good for a very specific strategy, or they're just outclassed by other ops, but still do their job decently well. C-tier operators are not bad. And to exemplify that, we see, I think, what is a very good C-tier operator in Echo. I'm a big fan of Echo. Echo is very good on sites that he plays. Echo just doesn't play very many bomb sites. Without an IQ, Echo is basically a free win, as long as you can stall the attackers for the majority of the round. And a high-level play on certain sites that's really doable, right? You take a look at, like, Cafe bottom floor. If the attackers are full clearing the top 2 floors, they're going to be planting with, like, 10, 20, 30 seconds left. You've got it now. They're easy. You look at bank basement. You've likely got other utility like Goyo or Smoke to stall out the attackers. If you've got a yokai drone in sight, that's like a free round win. Echo can be very good on these sites. Typically, you see the bomb sites where Echo is most brought out, though, are the sites where he can combine his ability to win really slow rounds, plus his ability to help his teammates get aggressive. Both Cafe and Bank have drone holes on the ground level that you can drive a yokai in and out of and feed really good intel for aggressive jump outs. The drone hole inside of Cafe Kitchen is notorious for being able to see player positions, whether they're around small bakery, whether they're around garage, ping them out, and then boom, a defender jumps out of the dining window and gets a free kill. Something like that. Attackers are catching on to this more and more, and you see the strategy kind of being watched for, and you'll see IQs look for this in particular. But if the attackers aren't aware, that's a free pick. That's a free run out. You can spot claymores, you can spot player positions. It's a little bit harder on Bank because you need to basically throw the yokai out the window, the CEO window, and then go in the drone hole, and then you can go back in and out. But it's the same idea, right? You're prompting jump outs. You could also use the yokai over in lobby and get a bit of intel that way to prompt jump outs, although then you're not really seeing the claymores. It's not quite as good. But Echo's ability to combine both of those abilities, right? Aggression in the early game plus really good win conditions in the late game make him very, very strong. He's just super niche. Echo's a great operator, but not viable enough on enough sites to be out of C. You can throw him up the blue drone hole from bottom blue. I can't. Maybe you can. I struggle with that. Next in C tier, we've got Nokk. A lot of people think Nook's ability is that she cannot be seen on cams. That's actually wrong. Nook's ability is that she gives you the confidence to just run in and take fights. Another operator that's like really good on Bank, as long as you're not playing the top floor site. Nokk has a lot of options on Bank. You can walk in garage and avoid the default cam plus the bulletproof. You can walk in lobby and avoid the default cam. You can walk in square and avoid the default cam. Usually garage is where you're going to see Nokk players enter, but can definitely have some strategies where Nokk will go invisible, walk past the cam, lurk, and get a free pick. It tends to work decently well for a lot of teams, especially when combined with something like a Dokkaebi, right? Chalet is the exact same logic for a lot of the 2 middle floor sites. You can walk in the front door or walk in the basement more often. As Nokk, you've got to find a way into the basement, but if you can do that, then you can walk past the default cam, lurk your way up the library stairs, lurk your way up West Main, find some way to get past operators, or get past intel utility and get kills onto operators. Nook's biggest problem is just that she's doesn't do anything to stop Banshees, doesn't do anything to stop Dreadmines, doesn't do anything to stop Beepers, doesn't do anything to stop Barbed Wire. A lot of the ways that defenders try to find lurking attackers is not visual, right? It's sound-based. And Nokk doesn't have anything to stop those sound-based pieces of utility. Maybe she has EMPs, but it's like, if you know that a Dreadmine, like you probably don't know that a Dreadmine or a Beeper is somewhere. And the EMP itself is going to make noise. So the whole idea of being sneaky kind of gets thrown out the window with any of those bits of gadget, with any of those gadgets being used to counter the Nokk. It's also a bit of an all-in operator, right? Nokk doesn't bring a whole lot other than the ability to lurk well. She's got frags, EMPs, and hard breach. Okay. I don't know if I've ever seen a Nokk player utilize can opener hard breach, maybe selfishly to enter some weird part of the map. Frags and EMPs kind of defeat the purpose of a Nokk, so that doesn't really get much use out of Nokk either. It doesn't contribute to roam clear, doesn't contribute to soft breach, just kind of struggles to do anything other than her one thing, and she doesn't do her one thing super, super well, but can get value sometimes. Next, we have Sledge. I'm actually shocked Sledge is this high on the tier list. Gun-wise and gadget-wise, I feel like Sledge is completely outclassed by Buck and Ram. Even if you want a bunch of soft breach, if you want 2 soft breachers, you don't bring Sledge, right? You're going to bring Sledge, or you're going to bring Ram and Buck. You're rarely bringing Sledge when those 2 operators are available, and those swaps never get banned, so they're always going to be available. Sledge is mostly used when you need soft breach plus frags or plus EMPs. Flashes are generally not brought on Sledge. They're on enough other operators, don't really matter. But if you really need frag grenades or if you really need EMPs and you need soft breach, Sledge can sometimes make the cut. I also think Sledge has such a high viability because he is just a comfort operator for a lot of players. You know, Sledge has been in the game since release. A lot of players really like the Sledge gun, even if it's not like the greatest gun. It's not a bad gun by any means. Yeah, he's a 3-speed, which is not ideal. A 1-speed, which is not ideal. But in general, I think Sledge is still very comfortable for a lot of players, and because of that, he probably gets picked more often than he deserves. Actually has quite a high impact win rate as well, plus 4.61, so maybe there's something I'm not seeing. I just don't rate Sledge very highly in my personal tier list. I don't think I would have had him in C tier if I was building this myself, but the stats suggest that he is in C. So we've got him in C, and this is where he's at. I think in general, though, worse than Ram, worse than Buck. He's the most quiet soft breach. That's true. That's a good point by chat. He is silent as a soft breach, so you could lurk him into certain areas, like, again, Chalet basement. You could think of him similar to a Nokk, where it's like, Nokk counters cameras, but Sledge can counter kind of barbed wire and soft breach and stuff. That's a good point. Next, we have Gridlock. Gridlock is the second best flank watch op in the game. Okay. The problem is flank watch is very low on priority, right? When you're building like an attacker lineup, there's often a lot of things that you need, right? We need hard breach. We need a way to clear the bandit. We need soft breach. We need an entry. We need this. We need this. We need this. And typically you don't get to we need flank watch for quite a while. This is honestly similar to the issues that Iana and Zero has, where a lot of Gridlock's usage is done just as well by drones, and every operator by default has 2 drones. Now, don't get me wrong. Grid track stingers are better than drones for flank watch. They are helpful. It's not a bad piece of utility, but it's really hard to justify bringing a Gridlock when there are often so many other things that you need in an attacker lineup. Grid also competes with Nomad and Claymores, both of which are leagues above Grid in terms of actually getting kills and stopping aggression. Gridlock's only real niche where she's considered better than Nomad and better than Claymores are staircases, which is why Grid is pretty much exclusively played on maps like Cafe, Lair, Chalet, Consulate, and then like maybe Nighthaven Basement, you'll see a bit of Gridlock as well to stop aggressive plays. The other problem with Gridlock is that even if you're on a site where she thrives, say you're attacking like Reading Room on Cafe, right? What do? Well, you open the red hatch, you clear through top floor, you work vertical, and then you execute reading. That's like the default reading push. Okay. It would be nice to put track stingers on the red stairs. Awesome. The problem is, by the time a defender is going for a flank, you're likely standing up above reading. And if a defender is like mailing those track stingers or shooting them quietly, you might not even be close enough to hear the track stingers being shot. Compare that to an air jab where you could be across the fucking map and you'll hear that thing going off. You know there's a flank happening. So even in her one niche of being able to stop flanks on staircases, sometimes she even struggles to do that. You kind of need someone nearby to hear the track stingers for those to be really effective. And while that's usually the case, it isn't always. And so in every situation, it just feels like Gridlock is underwhelming. Worse than the other flank watchers. Flank watch in general, not that good. And even in her one niche where she's the best pick, sometimes doesn't even work. Only 2 spots ahead of Sledge. We have Ram. I was pretty surprised by this. But here is Ram. Ram is the first operator on this list that in my mind feels really powerful in the right situation, right? A lot of the ops that we've talked about prior to this point have niches. They're good in their niches, but they're not necessarily like must picks, right? You think it's Tachanka, you think of Ella, certainly could be useful at times, but not round winning. Ram, I think, is round winning. Ram specialty is just doing the most soft breach. If you need a fuck ton of soft breach, you're bringing Ram. And the fact is, there's a lot of sites in Siege where having a fuck ton of soft breach is really good. Club basement, cafe basement, chalet basement, consulate basement, Night Haven basement. All of these basement bomb sites have a ton of soft floor ahead of them, above them, that allow Ram to, on these specific sites, be one of the best operators in the entire game. When you look at Ram's impact, her impact is positive on literally, and positive by a lot, on literally every single basement bomb site there is, with the exception of Consulate Basement, and that one has not the largest of sample sizes compared to the other ones. Ram is the first operator where on certain bomb sites, we're starting to reach the point of like 100 plus picks, because on the bomb sites where Ram is good, Ram is so unbelievably good. She has an amazing gun as well, the R4C. Even if she's not a 1-speed, she still enjoys that, right? They gave her smokes. They gave her flashes. 2 really good secondary pieces of utility. She has a secondary shotgun just in case there wasn't enough soft breach already. You see Ram also being used for entry. If you need to explode in through a castle barricade or something, Ram can be super good for that. In the right situation, Ram is just a monster, in my opinion. I think Ram is so good. The reason she's in C tier is because if you're not attacking a basement bomb site, she's kind of garbage, right? She does one thing really well, but on a lot of sites in this game, that one thing isn't something you need to do at all, right? You're not going to bring Ram to attack bank top floor. It's just not going to happen. So on certain sites, Ram is completely useless. On certain sites, Ram is one of the best ops in the game. She can be really, really effective. For that, she gets C. Here's your makeup showcat. Okay, I did scan you on a showcat. I know it's not full screen, but if I reach for the mouse to make this full screen, she's going to bite me. If Ram is very good on few sites and worthless on other sites, Finka is weird because you can add Finka to almost any bomb site on attack. And she will provide you value. She will be she will be useful, right? She's got a very high viability score, but a relatively low pick rate because she's used on a wide range of bomb sites, making her viable on quite a few sites. But her like relative pick rate is much lower than a lot of other operators here in C tier. I think the best bomb sites for Finka are bomb sites where you can get the maximum value out of her stim. You're going to get the most value out of a Finka stim when you have lots of people up and taking fights at the same time, right? If you're in like a 1v1, you're getting like 1 Finka stim worth of value by hitting your button. If you're in a 5v5 and all 5 attackers are actually in gunfights and not on drones, that's so much more value by hitting the Finka stim 1 time. So you ideally want to be getting these adrenal surges when you still have 5 players up and they're all getting active. That means that Finka is most commonly being brought out on bomb sites where you don't have to roam clear very much, and you can kind of immediately go direct to the bomb site, right? That way, all 5 of your attackers are getting into engagements at around the same time. That could mean a rush. You see Finka very popular for rushes, but it doesn't have to be, right? It just has to be some kind of a direct hit for Finka to get the most value on. But the problem is you also can't bring Finka on bomb sites where you have a lot of utility to clear. or bomb sites that are incredibly plant-focused, because she doesn't really bring util to help for that. She does have smoke, so sometimes plant-focused sites, she can be useful, but oftentimes if you need like a very specific operator lineup to go for your direct hit, if you need like a Blitz or a Kappa or a Ying, right, that's going to hit a higher priority than Finka, and sometimes Finka just doesn't fit into direct site pushes, but if you don't, then oftentimes you will, if you don't need all these operators, oftentimes a Finka will fit in quite nicely for direct site hits. Karaoke and Nighthaven top floors can be particularly good. Karaoke on Skyscraper, Nighthaven top floor can be strong pushes because you don't have to roam clear much. You can go direct to site. You can just hit things and it goes pretty well. Consulate pushes as well often have enough going on in them that Finka stims can get really good value. Finka's impact is kind of bad, negative 1.3%. Usually you're bringing a Finka when you don't necessarily have any better operators, right? You don't have any other options that can work, right? You don't think you're in a good spot for like a Ying round or a Kappa round. And maybe you have Finka plus these operators, but on average, you're going to be bringing Finka more than when you're not bringing those. You're going to be running more Finka when those ops aren't in play. So an okay operator, good for direct hits, but often doesn't bring the same value that a lot of other attackers do. Next, we move to the C+ tier. The C+ tier has two operators who don't perform exceptionally well, but in rare circumstances, they are so impactful that they are almost mandatory due to their unique playstyles. The first of this is Aruni. Compare Aruni to the other operators that can deny flashes and nades and will protect shields. Compare Aruni to Jager and Wamai. Aruni compared to Jager is also stationary, right? So you've got to commit to where you're setting stuff up. And you're a little bit more limited on where you can set up those surrogates. But the big benefit of Aruni is you stop a lot more than just flashbangs. Aruni can stop drones. Oftentimes, you want to stop a drone from being thrown in a window, you can use the surrogate. It also will sometimes stop players. Now, sometimes players just jump through surrogates anyways and they take the damage, but that's still pretty good value for you. You're okay trading a bit of HP on an attacker for one of your surrogates, and you can also pop those surrogates to open back up once again. So you generally see Aruni as a little bit better than Jager, but nowhere near the strength of Wamai. She doesn't stop as much utility as Wamai does. She's not as flexible as Wamai does. Aruni is often used in very similar spots as Jager, like on Cocktail on Cafe. Less so for Pixel, but if you really want to defend inside of Cocktail, or if you really want to defend the bathroom position in particular, where you need to hold down like one specific important area. Sometimes you'll see her like on Chalet top floor as well, if you really want to hold down like the bathtub. And she's also just generally more useful than ops like Jager and Wamai, because she does have soft breach, right? She's able to use her punch to open up rotates and angles. She gets a bulletproof and barbed wire, which are pretty good secondary utilities as well. It can often be easier to fit an Aruni into your op lineup than it is to fit a Jager, just because Aruni offers a lot more in terms of secondary util and soft breach that Jager just can't really afford to do so, right? So it's easier to build strats around Aruni than it is to build strats around Jager, even though the Aruni gadget is not really that much better than Jager's gadget, and even though the guns on Aruni aren't that great either compared to someone like Jager or Wamai. The other C+ tier is Maverick. Now, let me be clear. Maverick in 2024 is a miserable experience. Maverick is the worst operator to play, not because he is bad, but because he is absolutely no fun. Mav is the only way that you can guarantee open a wall against electricity, right? If you cannot clear an Electric Claw or cannot clear a Bandit Battery or don't want to, you have to bring out a Maverick. That makes him a very good operator when you have must open walls, right? I'm thinking about the CC wall on Clubhouse. If you don't open that wall, you lose the round, generally, right? I'm thinking of the IT wall on Nighthaven. If you don't open IT, you lose the round. These are walls that are absolutely critical to open, and Maverick is the most consistent way to open these walls. You don't have to worry about stopping a bandit trick. You don't have to worry about any type of tricks. You can just Mav open the wall and be happy, right? Wrong. The problem is, in 2024, C4s have arc lines projecting exactly where they're going to go, allowing perfectly accurate C4s. And critically, C4s, unlike a few years ago, do not get destroyed by electricity. That means that if a Bandit is just holding a wall, or a Kaid, notably both electricity operators bring C4s, as does Mute, then what you can do is the second you see a Mav start to open up your wall, you prep the C4, you toss it on or out the Maverick holes, and you kill the Maverick more often than not. Playing Maverick is fucking miserable because you need to constantly be opening a bit of wall, backing off, waiting for a C4. If a C4 doesn't come out, you approach the wall, you open a little bit more, you back off. Because if you die and you're the main way that the attackers are supposed to be opening this wall, you've just thrown the whole round. The entire point of Maverick is supposed to be that he is a guaranteed wall opening. But if you're getting nitro-celled, then it's completely antithetical to what you want to be doing on this operator. Maverick is still often brought because if you can avoid being C4'd, he is still consistent. He is still very good at doing what he does. He also has some interesting strats where he is mostly being used not to open walls, but instead to create sightlines. My favorite of these strategies is probably Nighthaven Basement. Often what you'll see on Nighthaven Basement is the attackers, they don't want to full clear. They'll get control of Cafeteria, they'll get control of Vending, they'll execute into Exo, and then they'll plant just inside of Assembly on the Exo door. And to cover that, you don't need to open the main breach of Assembly. You could just have a Mav line, and that's what we see a lot of teams doing to cover that plant. That can be really, really good. The problem with Maverick is just he is so miserable playing against C4s. If he dies, your entire round feels like he gets thrown out of the window. Sometimes Maverick is necessary, but man, it feels fucking bad playing this op. E- is a lot of kind of boring everyday ops that range from useless to quite good, kind of depending on the site. These are all operators that I feel are relatively balanced and feel pretty fair. And we're going to start with Skopos. Importantly, Skopos' score has a bit of an asterisk here. Skopos was introduced halfway through the competitive season. What I did to calculate Skopos' score is I basically looked at my database and I just deleted every round that was played before Skopos was introduced into the game. And then I calculated Skopos' statistics using just the rounds where he was an option to be played. She was an option to be played. So important to note if you're trying to like replicate this math or whatever, I don't think it has a big effect. Skopos was played for about 2/3 of all rounds, so we're only getting rid of about 1/3 of the data set. And with the large data set that we have, it's not that big of a deal. Notably, every other operator just treated every round the same, so bit of a different sample size for Skopos versus the other operators, but I don't think it's too detrimental for our data. Skopos is really interesting because Skopos does something that no other operator in the entire game does, and that is safely return from the roam consistently. Usually you have operators that are kind of good at avoiding drones, operators like Mozzie, operators like Vigil, and they can roam quite effectively. Then you have operators that are good at fighting on the roam by giving intel back to the defense, operators like Valkyrie, operators like Legion. These are operators that are, you know, maybe not denying information, but they're gaining information for themselves. Skopos doesn't do either of those things, but Skopos has the ability to just leave and not get cut off. The problem with a lot of roam strategies and a lot of bomb sites is you have to roam to die. Because if you, if you win a couple of fights and maybe you get like one kill, if you try to get back to site, there's almost certainly going to be an attacker holding a cutoff, and then you immediately get punished returning to site. So what you have to do is commit to the roam. Maybe you get one kill, you'd like to go back to site, but you can't because you'll get cut off, so you just stay there and you die. Skopos doesn't have to make that choice between playing till you die or trying to fall off. Skopos can just teleport back to the bomb site. And all of a sudden, this isn't something you got to worry about anymore. Clubhouse Basement, when you're roaming top floor, is a great example of this. A lot of cutoffs. Lair Basement is a good example of this as well. A lot of ability for the defense or for the attackers to hold that middle floor control and cut you off as there's only a couple of staircases to return to site. Nighthaven as well on Basement can be tough sometimes to return to the site. So having the ability to stay up on the roam, get a kill, and then return to site is actually quite nice. The problem is a lot of Skopos' other util doesn't really do anything. You get a free shield in sight. Okay, fine, not great. The shield has a camera on it. Okay, sure. Probably not better than the majority of other defensive operators that you would be bringing instead. And then you have a potential to flank as well. I've seen this utilized effectively once or twice in pro games, but it's really rare. I mean, you'll see flanks from Skopos after being misdroned on rare occasions. The real strength of leaving a shield up at the top floor is that you just force the attackers to deal with it. My favorite of these strategies is when you put the Skopos shield up in like the shower at the top of Clubhouse. So you can't just shoot the shield in the back of the head. You've got to bring over some explosive or some claymore to actually deal with the Skopos utility. And it just wastes time. Rarely, if ever, will you see a Skopos actually get a flank off because good teams are going to drone the shield. It's a similar problem to Cav, but I think roaming and then falling off safely is actually a really big benefit and does help Skopos in a few certain sites. Next, we've got Zofia at position 40. Zo went from a generalist kind of Ashe knockoff to a kind of interesting operator who is niche, but is quite good in her niche. Zo is now a 1-speed, and Zofia is the best bandit counter in the game. Zofia is amazing on bomb sites like CCTV Cache, Office Exhibition, Nighthaven Top Floor, all bomb sites where bandit tricking is extremely important and extremely good. Bandit would love to be able to to bandit trick the security wall. He would love to be able to trick the VIP wall. He'd love to be able to trick the IT wall, but he can't do that if there's a Zofia below him, blowing him to smithereens. Zofia is very good at vertically denying that and even killing the bandit on rare occasions, and also ridiculous at horizontal destruction too. You see Zofia sometimes run on bank top floor when you need to destroy a bunch of castle barricades and Kibas. Only 2 explosives, it's not the most, but the stuns are also helpful for getting information about where players are at and enabling things like repel-ins for your planter. So the lifeline can get good usage of the stuns as well. In the most recent patch, Zofia was added Hard Breach. Hard Breach is interesting. I'll say for now, it doesn't really fit with the current Zofia playstyle, right? Because generally you have Zofia below the wall, opening it up, and then a Hard Breacher at the wall actually doing the Hard Breach. There is a world where we might see in the major Zofia open the wall from below, stop the bandit tricking, and then rotate herself up above to open the wall with a cat opener. Could add some self-sufficiency on a bomb site like Office Exhibition, but then you're kind of enabling the bandit to just come back and re-trick it. I don't know. There might be some theory stuff there. We'll have to see how that plays out. I don't think it'll be massive. Right now, Zofia is mostly brought out as like a bandit counter, and then to an extent, kind of good horizontally against ops like a zombie and castle. Next in B-, we've got Thermite. You know what Thermite does. He makes a big fucking hole. Again, B- is a lot of just like average, decent, solid operators. Smokes makes Thermite really good at opening a breach, pushing in, and planting. Probably one of the best planting ops in the game that doesn't specifically bring a shield, because he can open the wall himself, he can smoke himself, he can plant himself. Very self-reliant. Like Maverick, Thermite is an operator that you want when there is one extremely important wall that you're trying to entry on. Great on Clubhouse, great on Nighthaven. Somewhat more unique than Maverick, he's also very good on basement sites like Chalet Basement or Consulate Basement, where there's one big garage that you need to blow up. Generally, it's hard to afford Thermite into an attacker lineup when there's not one big main breach you want, right? Can openers are pretty good and pretty widespread. Hibana and Ace are much better for angles. Unless you need to walk in a breach, Thermite is rarely the best option as far as hard breachers go, but it is common enough that you need to open main breaches that Thermite is sometimes the best choice. On about a third of the bomb sites in the game, you see Thermite being played more than any other. He's a good operator, right? He does one thing pretty well, does his job, no problems with Thermite. You know how he works. Right next to Thermite, you have his partner in crime. You have Thatcher. A little more versatile. You see Thatcher being brought out for reasons other than main walls. Thatcher is a good counter to Wamai. He's a good counter to Fenrir. Sometimes a counter to Warden. Often the combination of all of those. Surprisingly, a horrible win rate. You see the impact, minus 5.38%. With him having such a good gadget, I think the negative impact largely comes from just his other aspects not really lacking, or not really being up to snuff. Thatcher's gun is fine. It's good, not great. Claymores and breaches aren't great for secondary utility. Being a 1-speed is okay, not great. I find that Thatcher often struggles to do much after throwing his EMPs. Thatcher can struggle to get in and get kills since he's only a 1-speed. He has no direct advantages to plant coverage. He doesn't bring smokes. He can't see through smokes. He's not particularly good at clearing out any other utility that is not EMPable, like mirror windows or deployable shields. He doesn't support vertical play very well, even though he does have breaching charges. He doesn't hunt down roamers. And when you compare him to so many other operators that have impact EMPs, his usage is a little bit more linear. Usually you're bringing Thatcher for a very specific strat or because you're afraid of a Kaid, right? Thatcher EMPs are big enough to basically always stop a Kaid Electroclaw. Impact EMPs are not. That's probably the main reason you want to bring a Thatcher over something like Impact EMPs. And then rarely you'll see really cool Thatcher strats where you're like impacting a Warden. Our last 4 operators were all built to try to counter a Bandit. Now we see Bandit in the exact same tier. Bandit tricking is one of the few things in this game that can immediately win a round without getting any kills. Bandit's utility is simple to counter. If you just go below, you stop the tricking. Any type of EMP will stop it if you're not tricking. It's a very simple gadget, but to this day, if you can Bandit trick and keep a wall closed, you can auto win on certain bomb sites like CCTV Cache, and to an extent, stuff like Nighthaven top floor. We already talked about Maverick. If there's a Mav on the board, you can C4 him, you can shit on him, you can make his life absolutely miserable. If there's any other type of hard breacher, Ace, Hibana, can openers, you can trick that. You can trick Thermite too, although it's not the easiest thing in the world, you can do it. We've talked a lot about Bandit and his counters. Zofia, obviously, big counter. Bandit's most important walls, CCTV, VIP, and IT, are all very vulnerable to play down below. So oftentimes what you'll see Bandit players do is they'll try to hide in the prep phase. You don't want the enemy team to know that you have a Bandit. Then after the operators are locked in for the attack, you pray they didn't bring a Zofia, you pray they didn't bring a Buck, you pray they didn't bring like a Thatcher, and you just walk in. Well, the Thatcher's probably fine, but then you walk in and you attempt to go for the Bandit trick before they really know a Bandit is there. I will say, even without being able to trick, Bandit's still a useful operator. He's got a good gun. He's got a C4. Even if you're not tricking with them, the batteries are pretty good time denial. You can't justify him on most sites where you're not Bandit tricking and where there's not like one big important wall. But he's a good op nonetheless. There's nothing wrong with Bandit. Again, a lot of these B- tier operators are fine. Also, good point by chat. One of the few 3 speeds on defense. So some value in that for sure. Next, we move on to our trap operator. It is going to be Kapkan, plus 4% impact. At this pick rate is a little bit ridiculous. Entry denial devices are really good. People don't look for them. You can't run Kapkan every single round. If you're a Kapkan main, people are going to read into that, obviously. They're going to start looking at the doorways. But use sparingly. Kapkan gets so much value. Big maps with lots of doors like Consulate and Nighthaven are fantastic for Kapkan. Ideally, you want to run him on like the basement of these bomb sites where his C4 can also get a lot of really great value. Typically, you'll, in prep phase, run around, set up your entry denial devices. Then you'll try to get picks on the roam. Then if you can make it back to site after the roam, you can use your C4. That's a great round for Kapkan. You know, that's a really effective use of all of his abilities. You get a ton of value out of that. Absolutely worth the justification of fitting him into an operator lineup if you can get all of that done. On a lot of lineups, though, where you need a lot of utility, he probably won't make the cut. If you really need, like, wall denial and drone denial and mirror windows and stuff like that, maybe a Kapkan can be hard to fit in. But on gunfight focused strats, he can be really, really good. And again, used sparingly, his win rate is off the fucking charts. And right next to Kapkan, we have Frost. Repeat everything I just said. Frost, a trap operator that people don't look for as often. It is a bit of a reaction sometimes for people to jump in a window and shoot down. But even with that, you can put Frost Mats in cheeky spots around corners where they're not immediately jump in and shoot spots. That can often get pretty good values. Frost Mats, the biggest difference, they have to be placed quite differently than Kapkan, so Frost is often good on very different maps compared to Kapkan. Chalet is obviously the main home of Frost. Chalet is windows galore. But you also see Frost getting pretty good value on Clubhouse, Border, Consulate, all maps where you've got some decent windows that are that can be jumped in on, or where there's like spots that the attackers often won't be worried about, right? Top of the rafters stairs on Clubhouse comes to mind. Importantly, Frost also brings a shield too, which is a huge bonus. Shields are maybe the best defensive secondary utility. They're pretty rare as far as the defense secondary utility goes as well. So being able to throw one, say at the top of library stairs when you place your Frost Mats, or say at the vending machine on Consulate top floor, can be hugely valuable. You can get a lot out of Frost if you use her in these ways. Yeah, carried a lot by their win rates, Frost and Kapkan. Great operators, but you've got to use them sparingly. Next, we move to B tier. B tier has 5 operators, and all of these operators do what they do quite well, but are maybe overused, and so don't have the best win rates. they're also not so amazing that they can be run on every single site. So the B tier operators can be good, but maybe are a bit overused and so don't have the best stats. Clash is probably the only operator on this list who has made it to this point, not because she has a high pick rate, but because she has an exceptionally high ban rate. Again, impact is calculated, viability is calculated whether you have a certain threshold of plays on a bomb site or bans. And Clash is banned on a lot of sites where she isn't picked as much. Clash is exceptional at stopping really one-dimensional pushes. So you'll see you'll see Clash often on like Chalet Basement, right? Sometimes what you'll see is you'll see Clash holding down Boiler when you reinforce the Dining Hatch. It's really hard to get around a Clash in that situation, and there's not a great way to deal with Clash if you don't have something like Capitao or Zofia to knock away the shield. Without being able to force the Clash back or get the Clash out of your plant spot or kill the Clash, on a site like Chalet Basement, when she's holding on Boiler, it's almost impossible to get behind or above the Clash and disrupt her. She's also really good on like Consulate top floor. You see that sometimes to counter the Amaru jump-in plant on CEO window. Oftentimes you're worried about swinging past the window and denying the plant because there's really good plant coverage. Well, if there's a big-ass shield in front of your face, you can do that quite nicely. And with good coordination, Clash can be a monster. Take a bomb site like Nighthaven top floor. Clash on Nighthaven top floor I find is really interesting because it feels like a bomb site that Clash shouldn't work on, but does. Nighthaven top floor has a lot of angles. The attackers can come Aqua, they can come Rafters, they can come IT, they can come Connector, they can come Electrical. So there's a lot of places, there's a lot of ways the attackers in theory can get behind the Clash. Nighthaven top floor also has a lot of soft floors. There's a lot of ways that you can get below the Clash. Maybe working with a Deimos, working with a Buck. But the thing is, a lot of these angles are decently easy for for your teammates to hold down, right? You can have a good hold on Aqua. You can have a good hold on like IT, for example, and then you can put the Clash on one of these angles, and without the attackers breaking through other of those angles, you're just not getting past the Clash, right? So good at stopping some of those more linear one-directional pushes, and on a map like Labs top floor, while it is possible in theory for the attackers to take around the site and not go for a linear push, it is very difficult. So with good teammates, Clash can really push a one-dimensional push, can make a one-dimensional push, stop in its tracks, be completely impossible to clear through. Clash also one of the best shield counters in the game, right? If you can slow the Blitz, slow the Monty, they can't really get a whole lot done. And you can buy some time for some teammates to come through and help out and maybe get behind the Monty or melee the Monty or do something to stop that Montaigne. So value from Clash in that one. Also some unique strats. This is a good point by chat. Body blocking drone holes or certain doors to stop bandit tricking can be really effective too. In B tier, we have Hibana, the Hatch Queen. Hibana isn't actually that great on so many sites. Her viability is pretty low for other B tier operators, but she does what she does so well. On Clubhouse Basement and Bank Basement, Hibana is a fucking monster. So good at opening those hatches, and there's a lot of hatches to get. Hibana also sees a lot of picks as a very good secondary hard breach. Think about Cafe, for example. Often a map where you'll see Ace being brought more often, a map where can openers can be quite good, but a lot of hard breach is often good as well. If you need a secondary hard breacher, Hibana can be so effective in doing that, opening angles from long range. Often you don't need your secondary hard breach to be opening angles you actually want to walk through. You just want angles that you can look through. And Hibana is very, very good at that, shooting 2 or 4 pellets at once to open up lines of sight. Incredibly powerful. Also a mirror counter. You see Hibana a lot for like bank top floor, mostly to counter out like the Mira that is so powerful on that bomb site. Hibana popping open mirror windows is a nice benefit, especially when Mira is so commonly played now that she's not banned so often. Long range hard breach is nice, but Ace has the same thing, so not a huge benefit. After Hibana, we've got Capitao. Capitao is a very good operator, but he is also quite niche, which is why he's only in B tier and not higher. Capitao clears things that nobody else can. Capitao is brought out as pretty much the only operator that can effectively clear rafters on CCTV, the only operators that can clear back bar on Chalet, In theory, you can do this with nades, but it's so much easier to do it with the Capitao as well. Smokes are an extremely powerful tool. Smokes can be used to cover for plant. Smokes can be used to stop mirror windows. Capitaos are very similar to the default smokes, and so maybe aren't inherently better, but smokes are strong, and because smokes are strong, Capitao is strong. The one advantage Capitao smokes do have over other smokes is that Capitao smokes can be shot at the ceiling. And this has some extremely niche but extremely cool applications. You'll see strats on like cafe kitchen sometimes where you want to walk in bakery, but you don't want to clear the top floors. Generally, the defense are all holding quite good vertical angles on those, on the walk-in from bakery, but you could smoke those vertical angles and then walk in anyways. You can't do that with smoke grenades, right? The smokes would just fall to the floor. They wouldn't actually stop the entirety of the angles that the defense want to use. So that's a cool application of the smoke firebolts that you see, or smoke bolts you see sometimes from Capitao. Cap also brings EMPs. He also brings Hard Breach. He also brings a Gone 6. He's the ultimate utility operator. He brings so much and can be good in a lot of different situations. It's very easy to fit a Capitao into your lineup because he brings so much of the secondary utility. You're always feeling good about putting a Cap onto your team. You're never like, but do I want to bring a Capitao? It's hard to fit in. No, you're always happy bringing a Capitao. Not the greatest of guns of all time. Doesn't always help with like roam clear and stuff, so you can't run him on every single bomb site. But the things that Capitao does very well. And the bonuses that he brings to the rest of your push in terms of EMPs and Hard Breach and Gone 6 is also quite nice. Next in B tier, we have Brava, one of the best win rates of any operators, and the first of our 3 drone operators. Our 3 drone ops are extremely dependent on what the defensive lineup is, right? If you're up against a Maestro, Kaid, Fenrir, Malusi, Brava is ridiculously good. If you spawn in and you see Mira, and you see deployable shields, and you see Goyos, Brava's probably not the operator that you want. You'll see Brava on a lot of like jump in and plants type bomb sites, where Fenrir and Malusi are often the strongest choices. Bomb sites like Storage on Nighthaven or Bar Games on Chalet. Bomb sites where you want to be jumping in and immediately planting because you've got good coverage. Those type of sites are often countered in the defense with stuff like Beepers and Banshees and Dreadmines. Brava can very quietly take those pieces of utility out of commission, and sometimes you can even sneak a plant because the defense is expecting to hear a Malusi or expecting to hear a Dreadmine, and they don't hear it. Brava can honestly get some really sneaky stuff going with those types of strategies when the defense just don't know they've lost that util. The fact that you steal gadgets instead of destroying them is an interesting twist from Brava. I don't think it's particularly relevant. Usually the way that you see stealing coming into effect is like with cameras. So sometimes it's useful to hack like a default cam and then you can use that as flank watch. Sometimes Maestro's on the board and then you get a free like 3 great cameras in sight that can also deal damage and harass the defenders. That's busted, but for that reason you don't see a ton of Maestro, so you don't get that too often. Brava in her situations can be really effective, and it's always going to be dependent on the utility that you see. But if you've got a lot of that, Brava is almost always going to be a powerful pick that will get you a lot of value. Decent attacking utility as well. And then the smokes that Brava bring also just really encourage that jump in and plant type of playstyle. So you see a lot of good stuff coming out of Brava. Next is Wamai. I was a little surprised Wamai was this low on the list. He is so good at protecting power positions. But I think in today's meta, solo power positions that are stacked with shields and a ton of utilities, it's just not the same as it used to be. Wamai is the king of not being flashed, not being naded out. Magnets are incredible. You get, was it 5 or 6 magnets that you can adjust throughout the round depending on where you want to place them. You might not get all of them, but you'll almost certainly get 3 of them to make you equivalent to Jager, and you'll probably get 4 or 5 that you can put out before you get spammed with flashes and nades, combined with the fact that you can throw them wherever you need, help out teammates, place some over here in the early game, then go play over there and place your magnets in the late game for more of them. Just ridiculously powerful are the magnets. Impacts and beepers as secondary util is okay. The gun is good, nothing crazy. The primary utility here of the magnets are just absolutely ridiculous. The reason he's B, the reason his viability is only 20 and not closer to 25, is mostly just that it's not the 30-second meta anymore. And in a lot of bomb sites, protecting one specific area is less important than staying mobile and trying to play on the roam and move around a bit more than what we used to see when Wamai was at his peak. It's also sometimes hard to use Wamai on like really heavy site-focused bomb sites. Sites like Bank Basement, where you might get value out of a Wamai Magnet, could be useful, but with no real plant denial, Wamai can be hard to fit into some of those bomb sites. If Wamai had a C4, he could be so good on some of those sites, but only having impacts, I find that's a lot less useful. But he's very good on bomb sites like Cafe top floor, bar games on Chalet top floor where you want to hold down mezzanine. Just really ridiculous there. B plus is home to a lot of operators. That's the end of B tier. B plus is home to a lot of operators that are very niche and very site dependent, but they are so dominant in these niches and on these sites that they're still considered to be extremely powerful operators. The first one that fits that description, of course, is my favorite operator in Siege. It's Goyo. Goyo is fun because he offers so many possibilities while also encouraging active participation to get value out of his gadgets. He's a very team-focused operator. He sets up his Goyos and then anybody can use them. The guns of Goyo are pretty good, but can be hard to use with the Vector and the TCSG. And his secondary util has been nerfed like 9 times. You can still get value out of bulletproofs. You can still get value out of beepers for site setup, but it's not as ridiculous as when he had the C4s, of course. The main reason you're playing Goyo is because of Vulcans. Vulcans are ridiculous. They last 20 seconds and you get 4 of them. That means you can deny 1 minute and 20 seconds out of the round. That's almost half the entire round. Ridiculous amount of stall that no other operator in the game can even come close to comparing to. Now, obviously, you're not going to stack those Goyos all in one spot, and it is rare you're going to get 1 minute and 20 seconds stall out of them, but you can still get pretty close to that, especially if you're staggering them to get that time waste, right? Think about Bank Basement. You can set up a Goyo canister at the top of server stairs. You can put one, like, maybe dirt tunnel at the bottom of server stairs, and then you can put, like, 2 inside the site that you can pop just from playing back on a mirror window or in the default site position. Easy to stall out a ton of time that the attackers just have to sit there and wait. You can't sprint through the Goyo fires. It deals so much damage. You're going to be feeling really bad. That's a last-ditch effort that oftentimes deals so much damage that it's just so annoying to deal with. On a site like Bank Basement, Goyo is an immediate lose condition that any attacker doesn't, that if any attacker team doesn't clear with, they're just done. The round is over. They lose. You didn't clear the Goyos. It's GG's. Now, to be fair, Goyos are easy to clear. You can shoot them, you can twitch drone them, you can nade them, but they do at least force you to bring that utility, right? Every time you have to bring a twitch, it doesn't feel great, but if there's a Goyo, you kind of do. If you're wasting nades or wasting explosives to get that angle onto them, then those are nades that aren't going to get used on any other piece of utility. Nades that aren't getting used on maybe a shield or a Kiba barrier or something like that. And bringing that twitch, bringing those operators with nades mean that maybe you can't bring a Ying into your lineup. Maybe you can't bring a secondary hard breach if your main one goes down, right? There's maybe a lot of other things that you can't fit into your lineup if you're forced to bring a twitch, and that's still good value out of a Goyo, even if he gets hard countered. Anytime you're playing a clock strat on defense, Goyo is just broken. That's why he's so good on Bank Basement. He's so good on Cafe Kitchen. He's so good on Consulate top floor, where all of these bomb sites have very like stall strat metas. He's not higher because on non-stall strategies, there's going to be better options. And sometimes it's hard to find like 4 different spots where Goyos can be effective. But when you actually have those spots and when you're willing to stall at the clock, Goyo's ridiculous. Next, we have Nomad, the far better flank watch. Nomad. Really good gun on Nomad. Flashes are very important to the current meta, and if someone hits your ability, it's basically a free kill. Nomad, top to bottom, feels like a really good operator. Even if you're not, as we discussed with like Gridlock and the Track Stingers, even if you're not close to the air jab when it goes off, you will hear that thing. It's loud as hell. So if somebody hits your air jab, you're going to know about it. You're going to know a flank is happening, and air jabs can often be very difficult to spot. They do make a sound, but often you're placing air jabs in positions where they can't be easily shot. The defender might try to inch out and shoot the air jab, but sometimes they still just get hit by it anyways. It's really hard to get past an air jab. Oftentimes, if you're going for a flank and you hear an air jab, you just give up and you do something else. Because it's not worth it trying to clear that out and go for a flank when you know you're just going to get hit and you might die if you go for it. Despite being better than Gridlock, she has a lot of the same problems. She is somewhat redundant by drones. She is somewhat redundant by claymores. It is often hard to fit a Nomad into your lineup when you need so many other things on attack. Flank watch utility is not that highly prioritized by most professional teams. To be worth bringing, Nomad is usually being brought on sites where you know the 3 air jabs can actually stop flanks. That is where the flanking patterns are very easy and obvious to predict. The worst thing is bringing a Nomad and they just don't flank, and then you're getting 0 value out of this operator, right? You need to be confident that if they flank, you know exactly where they're flanking. That means all of Cafe, Nomad can be quite good. Armory Lockers Archives on border can be really effective because the flank is probably going to come through security, right? And through break room and through the hallway. If you can set up these air jabs where you're guaranteed to get hits, she's definitely a lot more valuable, but sometimes struggles to fit in. Next, we have a Tubarao. Tubarao is interesting because he's a stall operator with even less stall than most of his competitors. Goyo, Smoke, Tachanka. And he needs a wall to be able to help stall the deny, but he can also do some crazy shit with tricking. The impact/electricity tricks can be cool, but they aren't super common. Instead, Tubarao is mostly carried by his C4. C4 synergizes with Tubarao's playstyle really, really well, which makes him a strong operator if you can get value out of both the wall stall/hatch stall and the C4. No other stall operator like Goyo and Smoke and Tachanka have the ability to immediately kill a planter, right? Maybe you get lucky, you smoke at a planter with Smoke. Maybe a planter is stupid enough to walk in a Goyo fire. But usually, the only way to kill a planter is with direct C4s. Everything else just stalls out the clock. Tubarao does both. He stalls out the clock by keeping the walls closed for a long time, and he's able to stop the plant. That means like Chalet Basement, Bank Basement, Consulate Basement are all really good bomb sites where the denial of the hatch and the wall is important, and there's strong nitro cell angles. Those are the bomb sites where you're going to see Tubarao get played the most. Those are the bomb sites where he gets the most value. I think he's still an operator that can feel impactless sometimes. Almost minus 4% on the impact is concerning to me. But the DMR is pretty good. The C4 keeps him popular, and the stall, while it's not often going to completely keep walls closed, it can do that, and the stall is always going to be nice too. So a decent operator here in B tier. Flores, probably, in my opinion, the most slept-on operator by casual players. 4 explosives. Do I have to say more? Do I have to say more than 4 explosives, dude? Flores is the second of 3 drone operators. Bravo was strong versus like Fenrir and Malusi. Flores is really strong against both those ops, less so Fenrir. But is also able to destroy shields and Kibas and castles. Frankly, no other op in the game can match the pure, raw number of explosives that Flores brings. On top of this, he has some of the only explosives that actually dodge Wamai and Jager. That's crazy. These are operators that are specifically designed to keep shit like shields up. Flores just doesn't care. If there's ever a Wamai being brought to protect some important piece of utility, Flores just doesn't give a shit. He rolls right on past. He blows up the magnets at the same time that he blows up the shield. Flashes are quite good, as we've talked about. The gun has some recoil to it, but Flores' gun is not the worst. Any site where you see Wamai, any site where you see a zombie, Flores will follow along. That means that Flores is extremely popular on, say, Consulate top floor to defend the vending shield, which usually Wamai is very good for. Bank top floor for the stock shield. Bar games, you'll see it for, a zombie or shields around like mezzanine and library stairs. Just very good at destroying that hard utility that Bravo often can't destroy or can't hack, and Twitch also can't pop open. Not good on every single site. You think about sites where there are those long angles. That's the biggest thing, right? You can shoot Flores drones. You can't shoot a frag grenade. So if there are long angles that the defenders can shoot the drone at before the drone makes it to its objective, that's where you can get some value. It means it's pretty bad on like Chalet Basement where there's like just wide open space inside the site. But generally, Flores is almost always a good pick. Great operator. Great secondary util. Great primary util. Really slept on, in my opinion. Okay, Malusi. Breaking the trend a little bit. Malusi is very viable on basically all sites. She's a super useful op that fits into basically every lineup. She brings a solid SMG, a secondary shotgun, impacts, or a bulletproof. It's just a really great kit. Consistently, the best defenders in the game all have some way to set up the bomb site. Having a secondary shotgun is so important for your viability on every different site. Malusi does that, and she does it with a really solid primary gadget as well. The Banshees are basically just big beepers. You're rarely going to get kills off people that are slowed by Banshees because Banshees will immediately get shot. But But they're beepers that can't be shot until they're activated, which is value. And they're beepers that you get 3 of instead of 2 of, which is also value. So, I mean, there's good ways to work around. They're definitely better than just the secondary gadget of beepers. You can get a lot of good stuff out of Banshees. I don't think the slow is particularly valuable, but the intel certainly is. You'll see here a lot on, like, Lair, both the basement and top floor sites. These are sites where the attack, if they're split pushing, you need to know about it, right? A lot of site setup that needs to be done on some of those bomb sites, and if the attackers are split pushing the site, you need to be aware. Malusi makes it loud and clear. The Banshee screams, very good. Hyper flexible operators. You won't win rounds on just Banshees or anything, but she fills a lot of gaps for just 1 operator slot. Oh, it's 4 now, too. My mistake. Yeah, ridiculous. B plus number 24, we've got Vigil. Let me just start off by saying that the Boss G is stupid as hell, and that gun needs to be nerfed into the ground. In any other meta, the Boss G would be the most annoying thing. That's not the world we live in, but the Boss G is so fucking annoying, even still. The Boss G does 125 damage. That will down every single operator in the game, and there's 0 damage fall off until I think it's like 25 meters. That's ridiculous. Even at 30 meters, you can test this in the shooting range, you're dealing over 100 damage, meaning that you're downing a lot of operators at 30 meters. Which is ridiculous. The Boss G does this on a body shot, meaning that if you're holding an angle from 25 meters away and you just aim crouch level, you guarantee down anybody that walks into that angle. Unless your reaction time is dog shit, that's a guaranteed down. Furthermore, a guaranteed down is especially useful on Vigil because Vigil has a high rate of fire secondary and also impact grenades that can be tossed out to secure a downed kill. Vigil is so strong for that. It's the best gun in the game for holding angles. It also has ridiculous range. And it's also the best gun in the game for spawn peeking. It's only a matter of tossing out that secondary util to down your or to finish off your down after you get a big spawn peek kill. Spawn peek players are usually very far away. You don't have to hit the head when you're Vigil. You just hit the body, toss out an impact, GG's. It's a free down. Even if you can't finish off the down, you take an op down to 20 HP. Very happy for that. If that's not all, if the Boss G wasn't the most busted gun on defense, maybe not the most, but one of them, the K1A is also a great gun. Sometimes as Vigil, you don't want to spawn peek, you don't want to hold angles, you want to run around and get active. The K1A is also great. He has a very good SMG on top of the shotgun. You combine that with his ability to avoid drones. Vigil can waste a ton of time on the roam clear, then swing and do really good damage, likely get some kills, even if he doesn't bring the Boss G. Vigil can roam in any style. You can play Vigil in a lot of different ways in the roam game. He is one of the best roamers in the game, all because of this. The problem with Vigil is util-wise, he brings nothing, right? On some sites, like Consulate top floor or Nighthaven top floor, where roaming isn't super viable, you can't really bring this. But I mean, if you've got on most other bomb sites, if you've got 4 other operators that are bringing good site util and you want to run around, most of your team aren't going to care. And when you spawn peek, get 2 kills right off the rip, then they're certainly not going to be too upset at you. The top of B tier, we have our last and strongest droning operator. You could argue that Flores generally has a better drone than Twitch. I think generally exploding is more valuable than just being able to pop things. I think the biggest thing that separates Twitch and Flores is that Flores does things that a lot of other operators already do, right? A lot of operators have explosives. A lot of operators have frag grenades. Very few operators have ways to consistently counter utility that's not line of sight, right? Twitch's greatest ability is to be able to pop mirror windows and pop Goyo canisters. Those are 2 primary operators that Twitch counters. Those are 2 really good operators on certain very strong sites. And so Twitch is almost a must pick when those 2 ops are on the board. If she can get her Twitch drones in, very few operators in the game can really deal with those types of utility that you need to get line of sight on to break. Twitch also brings smokes. So like typically Mira and Goyo are being brought on sites where there's going to be a lot of plant focus, right? Goyo and Mira both really want to deny plants. So you're probably going to see those operators on bomb sites where planting is a very strong strategy. The fact that Twitch also brings smoke grenades is really synergistic. That helps quite a lot. You're already playing a bomb site that you want to plant on. Now you can smoke to cover those plants. The F2 obviously sucks, but the DMR is quite good. Even if you're not popping Goyo canisters or Mira windows, you can zap Kaid claws, you can zap Bandit batteries. You've got extra drones, which is good for intel. You got to wonder why anybody would ever play Zero when Twitch is an operator that gets so much better value than Zero does.
Far and away, Twitch is mostly played on Bank Basement. She's a must pick on that site, and I think she genuinely needs to be played every single round if Goyo isn't banned on Bank Basement. She deals with so much, then can smoke for the plant. Just stupidly good. We move on to A-. A- has 3 operators in that tier, 3 operators that can be played on almost every bomb site, but their abilities are either shared with other operators or are otherwise just not inherently game-breaking. The first of these operators is IQ. The thinking man's Ashe, you could say. IQ has great weaponry, has explosives now that she's got her frags back. She's a 3-speed, and on top of that, she's the best Valkyrie counter in the entire game. She's kind of the only Valkyrie counter in the entire game. Detecting and pinging electronic gadgets, plus being able to see defenders on their phones is like crazy good. She can clear walls, she can clear mute jammers, she can track vigil, which is really nice. She just does so much that it's hard not to bring her. She's definitely lineup dependent, right? If you are going up against a lineup like Mira, Azami, Cathal, Tubarao, Goyo, or anything like that, like you probably don't want to be bringing IQ. But even against that operator lineup, even if you do bring IQ, you still don't feel that bad because you're just running around with the commando. You know, maybe it's not the most utility out of that, but IQ is still so effective at just being an entry operator. Plus the fact that her gadget hard counters some of the best gadgets in the game. IQ on certain sites and in certain rounds is one of the best ops that you can possibly pick. Valkyrie cams plus C4s are often just game enders and can completely shut down an entire round. IQ stops that. IQ stops you from dying to just stupid shit and allows you to execute your attacking strategy. She's only A- because she doesn't counter everything, but she's still really good. One of the ops she counters is Kaid. Kaid is the best operator in the game when the goal is to keep a wall closed. Finding Electric Claws, if you do not have an IQ, is a nightmare. When you find yourself up against a Kaid, you really only have like 4 options. Option 1, you can bring an IQ. Okay. Option 2, you can bring a Thatcher. Okay. If you haven't done either of those, either because you didn't think you needed them because you thought you could do one of the other 2 options, or because you didn't realize there was going to be an IQ, then your options are drone to find the Electric Claw, and this can be really hard sometimes. Generally, the Electric Claws are hidden. I've seen them hidden in the floorboards, in the ceilings. I've seen them being hidden in the walls. I forget what game it was, but there was one team this stage that hid an Electric Claw inside the hard wall. Just ridiculous the way that you can put Electric Claws sometimes, that they are hard to find. And even if they're out in the open, you've got to know where they are, and to drone them out, that means getting a drone behind enemy lines. Typically, the defense are going to see that drone, they're going to shoot that drone. And you need to drone the Electric Claw, because if you don't have a Thatcher, you only have impact EMPs, the radius of an impact EMP is not large enough to clear out a Claw. So if you guess wrong on where the Claw is, all of a sudden you've wasted your impact EMP, the Claw is still up. You only have 2 of those impact EMPs, unless you brought 2 sets. So you need to have a drone if you want to use impact EMPs to stop these Electro Claws. And getting a drone behind enemy lines to spot that Electro Claw is often easier said than done. Because your fourth and final option is to just toss impact EMPs and pray. And that is sometimes a strategy that if it doesn't work well, it's just GG's. I have seen teams immediately lose rounds because they want to guess on the claw position. They guess with the EMPs, they guess wrong, and they can never open the hatch. Moto hatch on Clubhouse is the best example of this. If you see attacking operators that don't bring a Thatcher and they only have impact EMPs, it's very hard to get a drone into Moto down those main stairs because there's going to be a defender in Moto holding main stairs. So if you can't get a drone down there, you've just got to hope and pray you hit that Electric Claw with the impact EMP. Then you got to hope and pray he doesn't trick it. Just a nightmare without any sort of intel from an IQ or a Thatcher to neutralize that. All of that is before we even really talk about Kaid tricking, which makes any can openers or Selmas just feel really, really bad. Yes, it's hard to claw trick like a Thermite charge, but even still, Electric Claws can do a lot of good work against the secondary hard breach gadgets that you see or some of the other hard breaches that are a little bit slower. Kaid is Striker's worst nightmare because the impact EMPs don't counter the claws very well and the can openers don't open the wall fast enough. You get so much value. He does so well to clear out those, to keep those walls closed. And on top of all of that, he's got a C4. Because why wouldn't he have a C4? Fuck you if you bring a Maverick. Fuck you if you get the wall open and you're trying to go for a plant strat. Nitrocell comes out and blows up your hopes and dreams. Kaid is a fucking disaster. He's so good. He is so annoying to deal with. The biggest downsides is just that his guns aren't great. The TCSG is not an easy gun to use. And you can't run him on every single site because sometimes bomb sites don't have walls that are that important to keep closed. But other than that, if you can bring a Kaid, what he does so ridiculously well. It's not even fair to some of the other operators. Kaid's busted. The last of our A-, Castle. Castle at 26 viability. Again, the maximum viability score is 27. Might shock some people. Because I think some people think of Castle as a very niche operator. The truth is almost every site in the game has windows and doors that are important to keep closed. And when you bring a Castle, you should never expect that what you barricade off will be closed forever. But you're wasting a lot of utility. You're wasting a lot of time. You're getting still great value, even if the attackers do, by the end of the round, open up your barricades. You're not upset by that when you're playing Castle. The only site that Castle did not come out as viable on was Chalet Basement, which, yeah, fair enough. If it's a snowmobile push, there's nothing to castle there. You can't castle the garage. Maybe you castle the wine door, but then what are you doing with the other 3 barricades? I guess trolling your teammates by barricading off blue would be one thing, but yeah, every other side of the game, Castle at least hit the minimum round threshold to be considered viable on. On top of that, Castle is loaded with flexible secondary util. Secondary shotgun is so important, so good to have on every defensive lineup. You can use the bulletproof in a lot of good ways. Beepers can be good. On sites where windows are really powerful, sites like Bank top floor, Chalet top floor, Cafe, like all the floors basically. Castle is a lifesaver and feels like nearly a must pick time and time again. The utility is pretty terrible, but it's like Capitao. Like, if the gun's not great, it doesn't matter when the utility is just god tier. The only reason Castle isn't higher on this list is because there is another operator in Rainbow Six Siege that does Castle's job even better than Castle, but the job that Castle does well enough, and that job is so important that it still gets Castle all the way up into A tier. Yeah, I mean, keeping walls closed is just very valuable. Explosives are a hot commodity, and if you can waste 4 of them for the attackers, that's great. Very versatile operator that can be used in a lot of different ways. Next is A tier. A tier is 5 operators who are all very strong, but are also quite common, and for that reason, their win rates are pretty average. Most of the operators in A tier have counters, and most teams have figured out those counters, but they are still strong if the enemy teams don't bring the correct counters to these ops. And the first of that is, of course, Warden. Warden is really the only op in the game that really counters Blitz and Ying. Maybe that's not exactly true, but he is by far the best counter, especially up against Ying. Before we even get to his glasses, which are an incredible primary ability, his secondary ability options are amazing. Bringing a shield, bringing a C4. I don't know why anybody would ever, in their right mind, bring an obs blocker over the 2 best secondary utility pieces in the game. Warden having obs blockers available might honestly just be a nerf in case you accidentally misclick obs blockers when you meant to bring a C4 or a shield. But I digress. In theory, you can run a shotgun plus machine pistol combo, but the SMG-12 is kind of terrible as a primary weapon, so you don't often see that. Typically, you see him running his primary SMG. But if you're desperate for a shotgun, he can fulfill that role. So all of that's really great, but what you care about, of course, is the glasses. Flashes and Ying are so strong because against every other op in the game, there are basically free kills on isolated players, right? Say somebody is playing a position alone. Maybe they're on VIP in Cafe on a kitchen bomb site. Maybe they're holding storage when storage is the bomb site on Nighthaven, right? For every other operator, if you throw a Candela at that player, you push them, they're dead. Every single time. Maybe they've got magnets, but you can clear those out. That is true for every op in the game, except for Warden. Warden takes one of the best tools the attackers have in the game, which are flashes, and it makes them completely worthless. If Warden only countered flashbangs, he would be a good operator. But he doesn't only counter flashbangs, he also counters smokes, which are less common than flashbangs, but on certain bomb sites are far more popular, or far more powerful. Take bunks and briefing on Lair, for example, okay? oh, so the enemy is trying to, say, ignore the roam on the top floor, and they just want to hit bunks through green or just want to hit through the direct wall to sight. Too bad. You're trying to smoke plants? There's a Warden above. You insta-lose the round. Warden being able to see through smokes makes so many, and not get flashed out, makes so many attacking strategies completely worthless. Warden is a problem in every round he plays. Attacking strategies that otherwise would have no or very few counters get completely hard countered by a Warden. Often the attackers have to adjust their entire strategies just to deal with this one operator before they can do what they actually want to do in the round. Sometimes that means hunting down the Warden and killing him with like a Deimos. Sometimes that means EMPing him. I've seen players bring Thatcher on Ying executes only because they want to EMP a Warden. That's ridiculous. His gadget is incredibly powerful, and he can completely define how certain attacking pushes work sometimes. Warden's really, really good. Next operator in A tier is Lion. Lion does everything, man. Lion's got a great gun. He's got flashbangs and a very good roam clearing gadget. We've already talked way back when we talked about Jackal about how roam clearing gadgets are incredible. Roam clearing is one of the hardest things to do in Siege, and Lion is very good at roam clearing. Droning, scanning, and killing someone is a great combo and works really well when you have a well-coordinated team, which professional squads in general do. If you don't want to use the Lion scan to clear offsite players, then congrats, because the Lion scan is also really good for executes. Typically, late round defenders, if they want to stop a plant, they need to move, right? They need to swing the plants to stop it, or they need to adjust themselves to toss a C4. And if you do that in the middle of a line charge when a plant's going down, the attackers are instantly going to know about it. They can react, they can punish it, they can kill you. There's a lot that the Lion can do if he pops his charge mid-plant during an execute. There are two operators on this list that can roam clear better than Lion, but they're also two of the most banned operators in the entire game, so Lion is often a very solid replacement. And I would say Lion is better than those two operators, particularly when you know where the roamers are going to be ahead of time, right? Maybe he's less good for clearing out very mobile roamers that are going to be all over the site and are going to be hard to pin down. But Lion is very good at clearing out roamers that you already know exactly where they're going to be. They're holding offsite positions. They're playing with some util, and you've just got to push them out. Cafe top floor, Chalet when you're pushing bar games are great examples where you know where the roamers are going to be. You know there's going to be a roamer holding Pixel. You know there's going to be a roamer on Mezzanine. But you've got to push and clear him. Lion makes that so easy. We then come to the best soft breacher in the game. Buck combines the efficiency of Ram with the killing power and destructibility that no other operator really can match. If you are ever above or below a bomb site, you want to be playing Buck. His ability to destroy the floor or ceiling and then immediately switch to his gun to get a kill is amazing. He also gets hard breach, and because of this is probably the best can opener operator in the game. If you need can openers, you're probably going to put them on the Buck because you probably want a Buck for your push anyways. You might think that, Buck is really good, but he's only good vertically. That means that, he's only good on certain bomb sites. But if you'll notice, his viability is 27. What you're forgetting is that every single site in Rainbow Six Siege, verticality is important. Every site in the game has elements either above or below that are important to control and are important to manage as an attacking team and as a defending team, right? If only to deny that positioning to the attack. Buck also has a good gun. He's a 2-2. He's got flashbangs, can openers. A lot of pro players will just, especially back in the day, will just only play Buck. Not literally only, but back in the day, it would not be uncommon to see attackers or to see pro players that just play one attack or have 80% of rounds played all on Buck. You don't see that as much these days, but Buck is so versatile. He can be used in so many situations that he is honestly an operator that you could play every single round and nobody would ever get upset at you. Comfort op for a lot of pros. He's super reliable. You always love having a Buck on your team. Just ridiculous vert. Next we have Ying. Not quite an S tier, not even an A+. We've bought Ying in just the good old-fashioned A tier. And that's mostly due to Ying's win rate. For a while last year, I thought Ying was the best attacker in the game. And I think for a while she was the best attacker in the game. But for me, she's fallen quite a bit in terms of the attacker tier list, as her win rate just seems to be kind of horrible these days. And site-focused executes have become kind of less and less common as roam clearing becomes more and more important. I will say Ying is the ultimate execute operator, right? Candelas are fucking busted. They last for so long. You get so many of them. They hit people from so far away. And if you get hit by a Candela, you're blind until like the end of the year. So you're essentially dead unless you have a Warden or some other non-blind teammate helping to cover you. On top of these ridiculous Candelas, Ying brings smoke. The best execute utility in the game. And her LMG perfectly complements her playstyle. When you're playing Ying, you chuck in the smokes to let your planter plant. You chuck in the Yings to stop all the defenders from doing anything they want to do. And then you run in and you just kill 9 different people that are all blinded by your Candelas. And you never have to reload because you're running an LMG. Just goofy how effective Ying can sometimes be. Ying is obviously situational. She won't fit into every push. If you're planning on spending 2.5 minutes roam clearing against a Vigil and a Legion and a Mozzie, it's probably not going to be worth your while to bring in a Ying. But Ying's utility in herself makes execute focus strategies so good that you could pretty much run an execute strat on any bomb site and it might work out. You're going to get good value out of the Ying when you run that. If you ever just don't feel like roam clearing, bring a Ying. She's so oppressive. I think it's telling that Ying is so oppressive that that an operator whose literally entire existence is also in A tier, right? The only thing Warden really does, not only thing, but mainly what Warden does is stop Ying from existing. So Ying being this good, Warden this good, they kind of go hand in hand. There's no other good way to stop her, right? If you're ever in a game with Warden banned out and Ying not banned, just forget ever holding onto a bomb site because there's no way to stop Candelas other than popping the Warden. Magnets are fine, but they don't work. She's got too many Candelas. There's too many flashes. She can smoke out the Candelas before she even uses them. A good Ying player is just ridiculous. I will say, I think she's gotten so common and predictable that teams have started to counter-strat her very heavily. You can stop a Ying with, C4ing from below by playing the Warden. Which I think has really hurt her win rate overall, but there's no denying the impact that Ying has had on this meta. She is absolutely atrocious and a huge menace. Our last A-tier operator, we've got Mira, the OG busted defending site operator, and she's pretty much never really been nerfed. The Ashe counter is probably her biggest nerf, but even still, her windows are incredible. If the windows are not dealt with, Mira just insta-wins, right? You cannot challenge a player on a Mira window if you've not popped or otherwise destroyed the Mira. This forces attacker lineups to include operators like Ashe, include operators like Twitch, include operators like Buck. Because if you do not, and there is a Mira on the defense, you simply cannot compete. If you're trying to walk and push against a Mira window, you're not going to be able to do it. If you've cut across any sort of no man's land, the Mira is going to absolutely shit on you, and you can't even smoke Mira windows very much these days, because there's probably a Warden sitting behind it anyways. The fact that she has such a strong primary utility, and she can toss nitrous from that positioning, and she brings a secondary shotgun, makes Mira so good at what she does. She's really only limited by the spots that she can put the Mira windows, right? And the windows themselves are so good that you can probably find valuable spots on every single bomb site anyways. Some of the best spots from Mira that you see these days are in Janitor on Bank. Janitor on Bank is so good that sometimes you'll see teams put 2 Mira windows just inside a bank to look at the CEO for the top floor defense. You'll put 1 Mira window inside of Janitor, wait for it to get blown up by an Ashe charge, and then put a second window right next to it so that you can then pop open the first Mira window and use it basically just as another angle. Goofy things happening, but it is a good strat that I've seen quite a bit. You'll see Mira windows often on Minibar, on Skyscraper, all over the basement, on Consulate, Bathroom, on Cafe. The list of good Mira sites is long, and you don't want to hear yap about it all day, but it is very, very strong. A+ consists of 4 operators who are the absolute best at what they do, but what they do is maybe not game-breaking or is not the most important thing in the world, but it's still relatively important. Legion is the absolute best roamer in Rainbow Six Siege. And that's maybe a little bit surprising at first glance, because he's only a 2-speed. The T5 is good, but it's not insanely broken. And having a bulletproof and obs blockers as your second utility is fine, but like not great, right? Like those are kind of mid-secondary utility options. So why is Legion good? Well, he's a secondary shotgun, and we talked about how important it is to be able to bring that secondary shotgun. Especially as a roamer, you can give yourself a lot of options that other roamers won't really have. Typically, if there is a shotgun on defense, they're setting up site. They don't have time to go set up the roam, so Legion can set up his own roam game, which can often be kind of nice. And most importantly, he has goo mines. Now, goo mines in a vacuum aren't that crazy, They're visible, you can see them, they don't deal that much damage. Most attackers fall back and push them out. But goo mines do one thing that basically nothing else in the game can do, and that's counter shields. I have not talked about them much so far this stream, but right now, shields are fucking busted. Legion is the worst nightmare, and he's the best op in the game to counter Monty and Blitz, both of whom, I'll spoil right now, are S-tier operators. He gets so many goos, in fact, that yes, a Monty, maybe if he gets stuck by a goo, can back up and pull it out, but you can just keep spamming a Monty with goo after goo after goo after goo, and eventually you're going to make this Monty's life miserable. You're going to force him to take a bunch of damage, or you're going to force him to back off and try something different. Goo mines are the real only way that you can slow down a blitz push. Maybe banshees as well, but goos are so much more versatile. You can adjust them to where the blitz wants to come in. You can stack them on top of each other. They're harder to clear because you don't want to waste like an explosive on them. Goos are incredibly valuable in the site, on the roam, for intel to slow shields. Goos are great. And you combine that with a shotgun, you combine that with Legion's got a pretty good weapon. Legion ends up just being the most versatile roamer that you can pull out. Super, super good. Love Legion. In 13th place, we go from the best roamer in the game to the best entry in the game. Ashe is a fan favorite. 3-speed, maybe the best gun in the entire game. Secondary utility of breaches and claymores aren't great, but she's got a really solid primary gadget to make up for it. For pro players and casuals a lot, Ashe is often the default choice. Her speed and her gun gets her in the conversation as a strong entry operator, but it is her gadget that cements her as the best entry operator. Flores having 4 explosives is absolutely insane. Ashe has 2 explosives, but that's also quite good. These explosives come out fast, and unlike any other explosive in the game, they counter Mira. I guess Kali also counters Mira. But out of the explosives you're actually going to be using in an average round, they're the only ones that can actually counter Mira windows. Ashe being the best entry operator in the game and also being able to counter deployable shields, Castle, Azami, Mira, Maestro, like any of these deployable gadgets makes her, against certain operators, a must pick, and against every lineup in the game, a really good choice. You're never feeling bad about picking Ashe. She does everything that she could possibly want. And statistically, you win 30% more gunfights when you're running the R4C. The best roamer, the best entry, and now the best hard breacher in the game. We've got Ace. Ace, again, just so versatile, right? His breaches open more than Hibana, and he gets more of them than Thermite does. Often in video games, right, being the middle of 2 extremes is kind of bad. But for Ace, he does both aspects well enough that he actually ends up being quite good, and the best of the 3 hard breachers, the 3 primary hard breachers. 4, I'll include Maverick. He also has the best gun out of all the hard breachers. The AK-12 is so easy to use. It does so much damage. It's great. I love it. You see a lot of even entry players or secondary entry players jumping on Ace because, yeah, maybe they'll do some jobs about, like, opening things up and opening a wall or here or there, but then they're just getting in. They're taking fights. The AK is so good. Claymore and breaches are fine as util, not the best secondary util, but sometimes that util can be harder to come by, so being able to put them on the Ace can often be really nice. I will say Ace has his weaknesses. There are always reasons to bring the other hard breachers. No hard breacher is universal. Ace can be tricked quite easily, and although usually you can get an angle in the wall, a Kaid Claw or an Impact can really fuck up your day if you needed that hole to be entryable. And so that can be a big problem. Anytime you need a breach that you need to run through, he's typically not the best, but he can get around that by throwing 2 or 3 Selmas. Obviously, also very weak at clearing hatches, but you can get around that by throwing 2 Selmas. Unlike Thermite, who there's nothing Thermite can do to get around opening 3 walls. There's nothing Hibana can do, really, to get around, like, opening a wall that you can actually run through. Ace, while he does have weaknesses, can at least work around those weaknesses, so it never feels like Ace is a bad choice. Even on bomb sites where Thermite or Hibana are the better choices, Ace can often do the job even if it's slightly worse, and he's often brought even just as a secondary hard breach when you also need a Thermite or also need a Hibana, because he's got such a great gun and because he can simply hit another area of the map for hard breach or be a backup in case the primary hard breacher does die. Finally, the last operator of A tier, we get the best generalist in the game. And Striker is just everything that Sentry is not. As we talked about when we went over Sentry, attacking secondary util has so many synergies that defending util does not. Striker is the only operator in the game that can clear magnets and destroy a shield. He's the only operator in the game that can EMP a mute jammer and then hard breach that wall right after. Striker is self-sufficient. He brings an amazing gun alongside a secondary shotgun, plus all the utility that you can possibly need to be a solo lurk operator. On top of that, if you don't want to play Striker as a solo player, if you don't want to be away from your team, hitting the back or lurking around the map, you can also just fill gaps that your attack needs. Maybe they need EMPs and they need flashes. You can do that. Maybe they need smokes, but they also really want some soft breach charges. You can do that. Even if you're not bringing two separate attacking pieces of utility that synergize together, you can still do a really good job of filling those gaps without sacrificing a good gun, without sacrificing destructibility. You never feel bad burning out Striker. Sentry always feels bad. Striker never feels bad. It's crazy how different they are. That is the end of A tier. The top 10 operators in the game are all S tier. We're going to start with S minus. S minus starts to get into the absolutely broken operators whose abilities will define the round around them, but maybe statistically just aren't quite up there with the other S operators. The first of the S minuses is Smoke, the OG stall operator, the OG plant denial, and he's still the GOAT. Toxic Babes do enough damage and they last long enough that they can usually deny any plant that's being attempted. As long as you don't miss your Toxic Babes, they are so reliable, so consistent. They fill up so much area for denying plants. Unlike Goyo, you can actually adjust where you throw those Toxic Babes, and critically, the attackers can't clear them beforehand, right? So Goyo's got more stall than Smoke does, but if the attackers are smart, they can clear out Goyo canisters. Aside from killing the Smoke, you're not going to clear out those smoke grenades. He will get all 30 seconds of that denial, and when you're running a time-based strategy, those Toxic Babes are so useful. They will win your rounds. Unlike Tachanka as well, he doesn't take 10 years to pull up his gun because you're tossing them, you're not throwing them. So huge value over both of the other kind of stall of operators that you see. And on top of his ridiculously good ability, Shotgun plus SMG-11 is the best short-range gun combo in the entire game. And as a Smoke, you're always going to be playing positions where you can best utilize that Shotgun and SMG combo. The SMG-11 is so stupid. It's not the easiest gun to use, but oh my god, it's so powerful. Its rate of fire is ridiculous. The Shotgun helps you for close range. The SMG-11 is good for medium range. He's a top 5 defender in the game, in my mind. He's always getting value out of Smoke. You're always getting value out of Smoke. Positive win rate, positive impact, perfect viability, S tier. The next one's, I think, an operator that not a lot of people would have an S tier, but the statistics show it. People sleep way too hard on Grim. Grim is an area denial operator, much the same as Ying or Capitao, right? Much like Ying or Capitao, Grim's job is to kind of get players out of specific operators. The difference is that to counter a Ying, you can bring a Warden, right? To counter a Capitao, you can bring a Doc, or maybe a Wamai. Nobody counters Grim. If Grim wants to get pings on you, Grim will. Maybe you bring a Wamai, but even then, Wamai at max has like 5 magnets around, and Grim has 5 beehives. So he can almost certainly spam out those magnets and still scan you. Also, the magnets are often close to where you want to play anyways, so the bees might just hit you even if they get caught in magnets. Combine that with the fact that he can then bounce the bees around and dodge some of those magnets. Grim truly has no counters. And is extremely versatile at what he can try to clear out. Grim also brings the commando. Like with IQ, this gun is disgusting. It's so fun to use. It's so good. He's a 3-speed, so he feels really good about just like capitalizing off of his live pings. Live pings are so effective in Rainbow Six Siege. And unlike Lion, who requires the defense to move to get live pings, and unlike Deimos, who can only get live pings for himself, Grim basically pushes one button and gets live pings on a defender for his whole team. So effective, so powerful, such a good, strong primary ability. Plus, he's a 3-speed. Plus, he has a great gun. Plus, his secondary utility is really good, too. I mean, EMPs, Hard Breach, Claymores, all very useful secondary pieces of utility that you're often looking to put into your lineup anyways. People sleep. Grim is picked all the time. He has a perfect viability score. He has a positive impact as well. Super versatile, super consistent. People got to wake up on Grim. Fair. Jammers do counter the bees. Good point by chat. The bees will not deploy if there are jammers, but it's decently rare that you're going to see a jammer in a really important spot that you're going to clear, right? If you're trying to clear rafters on Clubhouse, there's probably not a mute jammer up there. If you want to clear like library corner on Chalet, there's probably not a mute jammer there. So you're right. There is those. But I think it's pretty rare. This is probably my formula's biggest failure. Azami is down at the 8th strongest operator in the game. I think most of us agree that Azami is the best defender. Most pro players will tell you that Azami is the best defender in Rainbow Six Siege. My formula has Azami as the 4th best defender in Siege. Azami gets dragged down a lot on impact. And I think that comes down to the fact that she is so often picked when she is not being banned, that bad teams are bringing her a lot and using her kind of poorly. She does have a really good win rate, and on certain bomb sites, she is absolutely ridiculous on the win rate. But I think people run Azami too much. I think sometimes she's brought on bomb sites where she isn't the best pick, and because of that, her win rate gets dragged down a little bit. So I think this is a bit of a failure for my formula. We'll still talk about Azami, but just know that in most people's tier list, Azami is probably top 2, if not top 3 operators in the entire game. If you don't know, Azami's Kiba barriers are ridiculous. You get 5 Kibas throughout the rounds. That's so many. That means you can burn out every Flores drone, the most explosives brought by any attacker in the game, and still have an extra Kiba to put up for cover. You cannot clear out Azami's utility with only one operator. You need to bring multiple ops if you want to clear out all the Kiba barriers. And Kiba barriers can be put up at a moment's notice exactly where you're pushing. They're reactive. They're so strong. In theory, you can shoot the Kiba barriers now, but in practice, it takes so many bullets that unless you're running a DMR, you're going to be spamming bullets at that barrier for ages. And eventually, when you need to reload, Azami is just going to swing out and kill you. There's no real way to counter those Kiba barriers without explosives unless you have a DMR. A good Azami player in a power position feels borderline unkillable, especially with nades being nerfed and the limited amount of attack explosives the attackers are going to have every single round. Azami is ridiculously valuable. Even in the worst case scenario, if you have Azami in a power spot, she's probably burning like half the time off the clock and wasting almost all the utility the attackers have. That means that when they get to site and they need to use those ash charges and explosives to deal with mirror windows and deployable shields and bulletproof cams, they're going to have few, if any of them left, and your site utility is going to be even stronger because you brought an Azami in the early game. Killing Azami, again, even if you don't lose any bodies, feels really bad. You lose all your utility. How are you going to deal with all of that util in sight? The answer is you're not. Azami just wastes so much util, wastes so much time. And on top of all of that, her gun's like a laser. Her gun's like pretty fucking good. And barbed wire is a really good secondary utility to have. Impacts can be strong. Deagle can be used to make good angles as well. Just a stupid fucking operator. The power creep is so real. Azami does everything. She's so busted. In 7th place and the top of S-, we get Dokkaebi. I think casual players really sleep on Doke. As I said, roam clearing is one of the hardest things to do in Siege. Operators that have utility that helps with roam clearing is extremely valuable. And there's no operator that roam clears quite like Dokkaebi. Dokkaebi speeds up roam clears by like a double. The fact that you don't have to drone every little nook and cranny for rat players. The fact that you can sometimes call the phones and just force defenders to fall off earlier than they otherwise would is so incredibly powerful as an ability to have. The nerf doesn't matter. Man, maybe it does hurt a little bit, but getting those logic bombs later in the round is kind of irrelevant because nobody's popping those logic bombs in the first 15-30 seconds anyways, right? You need to get into the map, pop those logic bombs. That immediately tells you if an area is clear or if it is not clear. It speeds everything up to have Dokkaebi on the roam clear. And if you do hear a phone calling and you can help your teammates to go clear that player out, you know that player is going to be panicking. That player is going to be constantly making noise. If they stop to turn off their phone, they're a sitting duck that you can go kill. Dokkaebi's utility gets so much value, and not enough people, I think, in casual and in ranked realize that. Doke does not have the greatest weapons of all time, but that DMR does hit like a truck, and the machine pistol's okay too. I've seen Dokkaebi players run Boss G, but I think it's a lot less good on the attack. The Boss G's biggest strength is holding angles. You're not holding angles as much as Dokkaebi. Maybe sometimes, but usually the DMR is the better option. And then you've got flashes and smokes, because why the fuck not? EMPs situationally are really helpful too, but flashes and smokes are two of the best utils in the game. So good. Doke makes roaming just almost impossible. It makes it so annoying. And there's a reason why some teams just permaban this operator nonstop. Next, we have S tier. S tier has all but one operators left. The S tier operators are operators that are universally great. They are some of the best ops in the game. They are central pillars of the current meta game. You want to be running these ops all the time. They are completely busted. And we're going to start with the other operator that dominates the roam clear game. That's Deimos. If Dokkaebi makes roaming almost impossible, Deimos sometimes makes it actually impossible, at least for 1 or 2 players. The scan is so good to be able to find players out. Unlike Jackal, where you've got to basically pick a set of footprints and hope and pray that you're finding a roamer, Deimos just knows if he's finding a roamer. Maybe he has to drone out the player first. Maybe you've got to get that scan. But the fact that you can also get the scan off of scanning pieces of utility can be really good if there's like a castle roaming or a mute roaming. You can get a lot of good stuff, a lot of good scans pretty easily on the Deimos. And once an operator is scanned, once they're caught out, they're almost dead to rights. Deimos can be used to bait. He can be used to solo entry. You can track somebody and tell your teammates exactly where he is, and then you push from one direction, but you're just baiting, and then your teammate comes in and hits the roamer from behind. If you run him solo, he's still good because the pings that you get are much better than the pings that the enemy get onto you. You get basically live information. They get an update every couple of seconds. That's still so much more valuable. And yes, you're restrained to the pistol, but it doesn't matter because the pistol does like 1,000 damage. That thing is so good. It will 2-shot any operator in the game, and even 1 shot to the body will leave any defender inches away from death. On top of that, his primary weapon is ridiculously good. He is the perfect intel operator with the small caveat that you have to drone operators first, and that's not that big of a deal. Again, also, you've got to tell your teammates through voice chat where players are at, but not that big of a deal when you're looking simply at competitive. Deimos is a monster in the early game, but somehow he's even better in the late game too. Clutching against a Deimos is actually impossible. If you are playing Deimos, what you're likely to do is you're likely to get yourself a man advantage on the roam clear. Then once you're in a man advantage, if you can get the plant down or just force the game to go kind of late, you force the round to go kind of late, and you get yourself in a winnable position, you basically make it impossible for the defense to clutch. If you're being constantly pinged out in a 1v3, it doesn't matter if you can see the Deimos. The whole team knows exactly where you are. It makes clutching impossible if you're being Deimos scanned. So, I don't know. It just feels really, really bad playing against a Deimos. He does what he does so well. He's good at the start of the round. He's good at the end of the round. He's the best attacker in the game that actually brings a gun. We got 2 more attackers to talk about. In 5th place, top 5, we've got Fenrir. Again, with a zombie being kind of misreported by this metric. Probably doesn't deserve to be top 5, but he's top 5 regardless. Beepers are good. Banshees are great. Dreadmines are amazing. You put these things up everywhere, and if the attack don't clear them, they don't push the site. It's as simple as that. You cannot push into a Dreadmine. You've got to clear that thing ahead of time. And to be fair, Dreadmines are relatively easy to clear. Certainly much easier to clear than before, but you still need to get an angle on them, which does give time for the defenders to swing and shut your shit down. Unless you're bringing something like if you're nading them out, or you're bringing an EMP, or you're bringing like a Twitch drone. Fenrir also has the bulletproof, which is okay. But the shotgun pistol, I think, is the real thing that keeps Fenrir's pick rate so ridiculously high. He's so easy to fit into every single lineup, but with the shotgun pistol especially. You can put him anywhere. He'll set up your site. He'll put dreadmines all around your site. Now you can't walk in. If you jump in, you got to turn around to shoot that thing. And if you don't turn around to shoot that thing, you lose, because it's not like a Grismot. It's not like a Kapkan trap where you're taking some damage. It's a trap where you're full blind. You just lose. You just can't fight back there. It's such a powerful ability. He gets so many of them, even post-nerfs. Fenrir is easily an S-tier operator. He's got so strong, he gets so many of them, and he's good at setting up the sites, and he's got a pretty good gun. Ridiculous. Yeah, this op's stupid. In 4th place, we get our first shield, I guess beside Fuze. A good blitz player on a strong blitz site is the most terrifying thing in the game. And blitz in and itself is doing a lot to just lift the attacker win rate as high as it is right now. If a good blitz player is running at you, you effectively have 0 options, right? You have two things that you can do if a blitz is running at you. You can turn around and run, in which case he's going to pull out his pistol and shoot you and you're going to die. Or you can try to shoot the blitz, in which case you're going to get blinded, you're going to get pushed to the ground, and you're going to get meleeed and killed. If a blitz is close to you, you're already dead. It doesn't matter. He will blind you, he will push you over, he will melee you. Everything is just done. It's a done decision, even if you're playing a warden. Even if you don't get blinded. It's still an unwinnable situation. Even if you... it's not unwinnable, but it's still such an awful situation, right? Even if you can somehow not get flashed, maybe it's on cooldown, maybe you're on Warden, or maybe you're on a mute jammer. He's still, if he's in close proximity to you, going to make you fall to the ground, and he's going to kill you already. The only way to seriously counter Blitz is to get distance between you and him, or have teammates set up crossfires. And on certain sites, in certain positions, this is just not possible, right? Take Rafters on Clubhouse, okay? You can't not play Rafters because it's too important of a position to give up for free. You also can't really play it with a teammate because there's too many out of spots for your teammates to go. Maybe you've got a teammate down at the bottom of Rafters, but probably not. It's a very solo position, and it's not a solo position because you're playing it wrong. It's a solo position because that's how most teams need to play that site. If you get pushed by a blitz and you don't have something there like a Banshee or a Goyo, you're just dead, right? Assuming the blitz can get in and you don't get a vertical pick onto him, there's nothing you can do about it. On top of this, Blitz is one of the best planters in the game. He gets smokes. He can't be shot easily from above. He can't be shot easily horizontally. And if he hears a C4, he takes his cover with him. Unlike Osa, whose coverage blows up, and then you can just shoot the Osa. If you try to C4 a Blitz, he's going to run away, and then he's going to come right back with the shield. It doesn't seem to matter. The only thing that stops Blitz from being S tier is that he struggles sometimes with closing distance, right? If Blitz has got to go in a long area or go a long distance, he can't really sprint at you because you can shoot him in the feet. And you can sometimes get an angle from like above or find a workaround. A workaround. His flash doesn't work at super long ranges. So there are certain positions and situations where a Blitz doesn't work. But in the positions where Blitz does work, he's a monster, and you can't do anything about him, and he's so annoying, and I don't know what to say. He's absolutely the most annoying op in the game to deal with against. In third place, we have Valkyrie. Valcams are, to this day, maybe the strongest defender gadget in the game. Without IQ, they are nearly impossible to spot out. They give live pings to every single teammate, and the attack have no warning that they're getting pinged, that the information is being fed to them. Valk utility is just so fucking good. And then on top of that, she has a C4, which is not only the best secondary utility in the game, but it also synergizes specifically with her primary ability. Being C4'd from below is oftentimes a strategy that is nearly uncounterable if you don't spot out the Valk cam, especially if you don't know that there's a Valkyrie there and you didn't bring an IQ. And it's round ending, right? You get an important pick with the C4, or you get two picks with the C4. It's so fucking good. On top of that, you're not just synergizing with a Valk C4, but you're synergizing with everybody's C4. Oftentimes, you're not bringing Valkyrie with one C4 on the board. You're bringing 2, 3, 4 C4s alongside the Valkyrie, which means that you're getting value not only off of the single C4, but also all those nitros that can get vertical kills and give you so many of those free kills that the attackers just can't really do much against. The MPX, I think, is also very overlooked as a gun. It hits headshots like crazy. It's got low damage, but it doesn't matter with no recoil. It's very, very busted. Valkyrie is almost the most banned defender in the game. She's just behind Azami. She can be played as an anchor by utilizing the C4. She can be played as a roamer by asking her teammates to get on cams and running around with perfect utility. You can run Valkyrie every single round because you can switch the cam spots every single round as well. She's super unpredictable. She's amazing at flanking. She's amazing at vertical play. She does it all. Valcams are scary, and more often than not, the attackers won't know where they are. And if you're being live pinged, you just lose your fights. In second place, according to our formula, the second best operator in the game and the last operator in S tier, we've got Mute. A little surprised because I don't think Mute feels that busted. But with how ridiculously often Mute is played, his win rate is absurd. Mute is picked more than any other defender operator in the game, and he's got one of the most ridiculous win rates in all of defense. There is simply no operator in the same category as Mute that's winning his percentage of round wins at his level of picks. And the thing with Mute is he just does it all. He has a better version of Smoke, and Smoke is already an S tier operator. Instead of Toxic Babes, you get C4s, which are a little bit worse, right? You don't get Barb, and you get a C4 instead. So you don't have as much time denial as Smoke does. But you're better at killing the planters. So A bit of a trade-off, but maybe a little bit worse and all. But instead you get mute jammers. And jammers do everything, bro. Jammers can be played, jammers can be countered themselves. They can get EMP'd. They don't go everywhere. They're stationary gadgets. So good attackers can play around jammers, but it doesn't matter because jammers can counter almost every single attacking piece of utility in the game. Even if you're able to work around a jammer by, maybe you're breaching above a site. Maybe you're jumping a drone over them or tossing a drone a different direction. Jammers are still so universally powerful that it's always going to be disruption. It's always providing value, and it always is annoying from the attackers to have to deal with these jammers. Can attackers deal with mute jammers? Absolutely. But it's so much of a pain, and it's so consistently going to be something they have to clear out. That's a huge problem. It, of course, also counters drones. Countering drones is really, really important. Drones are very powerful. They have intel to the attackers. They're the primary advantage the attack have over defense. Mute also counters drone-specific operators like Flores, which, again, when Flores is really, really busted at countering shields, a mute stops a Flores dead in its tracks. Mute is very often the operator you go to when you have a problem you have to solve. I'm worried about being Grimmed, I'll bring a mute. I'm worried about being Flores, I'll bring a mute. I'm worried about hard breach, I'll bring a mute. I'm worried about drones, I'll bring a mute. No matter what you want to counter, a mute can probably have a pretty good answer to it. And on top of that, he's got the busted SMG 11 plus shotgun combo that we talked about earlier with Smoke. Some of the best short range and medium range guns in the entire game. And he has a C4, because of course he does, right? Why wouldn't he have a fucking C4? Best secondary util in the game. He's so consistent. You play him on every game. He's reliable. Everyone loves Mute. There's no reason not to bring Mute. We've got one more operator to talk about. You already know what it is. It's the only operator in S+ tier. The gap in score. You see the score for 52.41. The gap in score here is kind of ridiculous. It doesn't look that crazy, but compared to other gaps in our list, it is one of the widest that we have. We're taking Mozzie. Yeah, it's not a tough prediction. Make no mistakes, we're in a shield meta, and specifically we're in a Mozzie meta. A 4.61% impact is ridiculous, okay? Plus 4.61% on impact is insane given the stat that we have calculated. 6 operators have higher impact than Mozzie, okay? But 5 of those operators have a sample size of less than 100 rounds, so they really don't matter. These are operators like Kali, who it's like, okay, Kali's not a better operator than Mozzie. The only operator who doesn't, and to be clear, Mozzie's pick rate, Mozzie's sample size here is 710, so 7 times the sample rate of 5 of those operators that have over plus 4.61 impact. And the other operator is Echo, who is extremely good, but extremely niche, and has a very small sample size, only a few different sites. So not really fair to compare any of those operators to Monty. Nobody's in Monty's ballpark. Monty has played on every bomb site against every definer lineup, and Monty would be run close to 80% of all rounds if he wasn't banned in over 2/3 of all matches through competitive. Much like Blitz, if a Monty is next to you, you're just dead, right? Now, you can run away from a Monty, maybe easier than you can run away from a Blitz, because Monty takes a little bit longer to pull out the pistol and kill you. But if you do this, you're giving up ground for free, and you can't do that consistently throughout a round, right? Eventually, you're going to be giving up ground for free to Monty over and over and over again, and you're going to reach the bomb site. And then guess what? If you give up the bomb site for free, you insta-lose, right? And if you don't want to give up the bomb site for free, guess what? Monty's going to smoke. He's going to plant. You can't shoot him. You can't kill him from above. He's going to dodge C4s. He's going to push through... he's going to set up the most perfect plant that he possibly can, and you're going to do nothing about it, right? There's no counter to Monty starting to this plant. Maybe you can get a C4 off, but that's honestly much easier said than done. And if he doesn't feel like planting, guess what? He's going to push through your site and tell all of his teammates exactly where you are, and you're going to get shit on anyways. Monty is extremely versatile. He gets used on anything. The biggest reason why he's used over Blitz is because if you've got distance against a Monty, you can't do anything except for stare at him as he walks at you and eventually pushes you over and kills you. He takes cow tipping to a completely new level. Unlike Blitz, who you can at least get some distance on and maybe beat out, you're not beating a Monty. He's taking all the space you can get. The only way to beat a Monty is by getting around him or by having teammates set up a crossfire. But again, this doesn't really happen on all sites, right? This is just impossible to do in certain parts of the map. Even Monty's best counter in terms of Legion goo mines are only a stall. They don't actually stop Monty from doing what he wants to do. They simply make it slower. Monty is